Yeah, I know. He's getting, I think, one of the remote ones. We don't have to use the manual one. Says we've talked in years
I'm
past.
telling you so you guys know that.
Well, he's probably watching,
Yeah,
so
yeah, you can see it
I
on
ran
the
out of
video.
Pepsi.
I know. You know, he hasn't had Pepsi in 2 years.
I know.
He's an iced tea guy. So on behalf of the coalition, thank you for entertaining the opportunity again to be a part of the coalition. We are now in our 14th year. In years past, I think what makes this a strong case for the Washington County and City of Hagerstown is we're doing this together. So the information I sent along is very similar to what we've done in the past. We, of course, have an agenda, but just to talk about what we accomplished last year, again, I-81, the widening, has been on the agenda probably for 12 years. And the good news is when we go down there, they say, we know you want I-81 money. So we're on the top of the list when it comes out. The I-70 Maryland 65 interchange, that's still in process. And so that's on our list again for this year. Capital budget request, we did get some money there. The urban improvement project, of course, the governor contributed $7.5 million over 5 years, and so every year we go down to make sure the money's in the budget. It was in this past year. Thomas Kennedy Memorial Park was a big win for the community. We ended up getting $300,000 between the House allocated $200,000, and we got $100,000 in bond bill money. And Boonesboro Road Museum, we asked for $100,000 but received $50,000, so we thought that was a win. The Williamsport National Park Service project, we went down to advocate for that, and as you've heard lately, there's going to be monies for that. They're buying the building, and that project is moving forward. And again, that will be part of this year. We visited, I think, last year, as far as the mental health funding. Again, we went down there to advocate on behalf of, since Maryland passed legislation to make sure we had services that we needed money to do that. So we advocated for that. We had a good turnout again at our annual day in Washington County. And again, this year, it's going to be January 30th, 2019, and that's 99% sure that's state of the state, and that's a good day to see some of the administrators there versus our elected officials. We think it's a good way to see our secretaries. So for the coming year, again, I-81 is on there again, construction funding for phase 2, the I-70 Route 65 interchange improvements. Again, there's an estimate of $41 million, so we're asking for monies to keep the project moving forward, the planning, and then the start of that. Community revitalization, again, we're going down there to protect the monies that the governor has allocated for us, and we'll see after the November elections how that works out. Either way, we're going to be down there to make sure we're advocating on behalf of the monies for the urban improvement project. State tax exemption for aircraft parts. This is something that Councilmember Heffernan may be able to speak to. I know that in the state of Maryland, I believe there's taxes on the parts. Is that right? In our surrounding jurisdictions?
Maryland is the last state in the Northeast that taxes aircraft parts. So what's happening is general aviation businesses that deal with private aircraft that are subject to sales tax, not governmental aircraft or other tax exempt entities. Business is leaving Maryland, and you don't see any new general aviation businesses opening up in Maryland. Virginia was the last state. They just their tax exemption just went in July of this year. So Maryland is the last holdover. So that's we've been pushing that for 3 years, and it passes the Senate every year, but then it gets stuck in Ways and Means in the House every year. So you want to push it through.
I think you know who you need to
Yes.
take to advocate.
Well, and obviously, it'd be a win for our county, win for the state. So
There's a crying need in the county for an avionics shop. I've been asked to do one for years, and there's no business incentive, because in an aircraft, you can fly another 15 minutes, you can be in Lancaster, you can be in, another 30 minutes, you can be up in Delaware.
Sure.
It's all tax exempt.
Sure.
And that's the biggest piece of that bill is the hardware, and that's taxed. So, if you can save $300, $400, $500, $600 by flying another
Sure.
15 minutes, I'll do it.
Right, sure. Well, I'm glad, this is perfect timing, because we're getting into the agenda for this year, and so the tourism piece, I skipped over, hoping you'd get here for the John Brown Farm, CVB, tourism attraction, and then we'll talk about the Workkeys.
Well, I'll just say the John Brown Farm, that's still an agenda item that's in draft form. There's still some work that Dan's doing with the family on whether that's not going to be ready this year. He hopes to have that finalized before our next meeting at the end of the month. But that certainly is, could be a very nice attraction down in South County, as well as one that just, recognizes some of our cultural heritage and things that have been done that a lot of people weren't aware of. I know I wasn't aware of a lot of the history involved with the John Brown Farm until Dan brought this to our attention. So we all know how beneficial tourism is to our community, and anything we could do to add another tourism asset, I think is a good thing. We all benefit from that through the stays at the hotels, inside the city, outside the city, as well as the money it brings to, our small businesses out there.
The other piece on there for education, if you haven't met our new Hagerstown Community College president, Jim Klauber, he brought to us, it's not a new concept, but it's new to Maryland, Washington County, the Workkeys Certification opportunity. And we think that's a great initiative, and we're going to ask for some pilot dollars that would be matched by HCC. On this Workkeys Certification, we'd be the first county in Maryland to start this process. HCC is already doing some of this. Some of our organizations in Hagerstown and Washington County are already part of Workkeys. There's a boot camp we're going to as partners between the county, the chamber, the library, the public school system, and HCC. We're sending some partners down in November for some boot camp training. So we're making an investment, and then the second part is in January. So we're looking to see if there'll be some legislation, again, asking for some seed money to get us started, and then HCC will follow up with some more dollars over 3 years. There are probably another one or two agenda items that we're still fleshing out. This is what we have for now, and we have another meeting next week to make sure we're moving forward in the right direction. So we think we have some good initiatives. Again, we think we have a great program going on in Annapolis. We want to continue with this as we move forward. And so we're here, number one, to answer questions, and then ask again for the city's participation in some of the funding for our initiative.
I'd also just bring up the watch list, which is something that we always look at. If there's anything there you'd like to add, please let us know before the next meeting. We'll try to get that on the agenda. I think what you're going to see in this year's session is a lot of discussion on education funding. The Kerwin Commission's report came out last year. They're doing some updates. They were basically holding off any major legislation until this session, until after the election. How that impacts our community can be significant. So we're going to watch how those things progress. It could be very positive. However, sometimes when they're looking at education funding formulas, sometimes the rural counties kind of get left out a little bit. So we'll be monitoring a lot of that, but I see that as taking up a lot of the agenda in the next session. As far as how we use our money, I know, that's been a big priority for MML and MACO. Both those organizations really carried the torch for those projects. There was a success last year in where they basically gave a 5-year commitment to slowly rebuild that up. I know the municipalities in particular, I think, got returned closer to historical numbers. The counties got some money too, but not quite from a percentage-wise what the municipalities had, so there's still more work to be done there. But I know that was really a win last year, I think, for everybody, and hopefully within 5 years, as it steps up each year, they'll come to a more permanent solution with that formula. But we'll watch and see if anything pops up next session for that. I don't think we're expecting that because of what was passed last year. But you just never know. It a lot depends on, I guess, the gubernatorial election.
And speaking of elections, that's another piece. There's going to be a big turnover of elected officials in Annapolis, not good or bad, just reality. Some folks have run for other office and did not get selected or elected to get to the general election. And there'll be some new leadership of these key committees. So part of this year is to establish relationships, new relationships with committee chairs. and strengthen those and begin relationships with our new elected officials that we don't know and they don't know us. So this is going to be a real critical year here in Annapolis.
Any questions for Paul, Jim?
No.
Now that Jim finally got here.
So the Managed Scanning and Associates, the watch list is what they're really gonna be focused on as to what's going on?
Well, they basically carry the agenda items we do. That's their main priority, is to work those issues. Prior to that, the watch list is just something that we always say, okay, while you're pushing our agenda items, if you hear anything that has to do with these items, let us know. And that way we could react quickly. A good example of that was years ago, is when we had the coalition very early on. There was an attack on gaming revenue that came out of nowhere. And within probably 2 days, we were able to rally a whole lot of support from the county to go down and push the committee to where the committee chair said, please stop the faxes and calls. And they were our lobbyists. It was a different lobbying firm at the time, but they were able to bring in Jim Hovis, who was working the gaming funds back in those days, to meet with some people, get them educated on what some of the numbers. They were reading numbers in a report that showed a huge amount of money that was gross, not net. So when they saw that big chunk of money, they thought, why don't we get a bigger piece of this pie, when they needed to be educated that, hey, the actual net is a small amount, and by the way, all that money goes half to our fire and rescue services and half to some very worthwhile local nonprofit organizations. Once that educational part was done, that issue was dropped. But the key to that was quick reaction time. So that's what we kind of look at the watch list, is just things that we're feeling out there could impact us, that we want to be able to react to quickly. And the best way to do that is have somebody on the inside that's working those channels.
The other things they do is they set up a lot of work setting up our meetings with our key legislators and our committee chairs. They're down there and they have the relationships, and they get us in front of those people. So they're an important part of our day in Annapolis.
Good.
Thank you for
Anything?
being our voices. You know? I know
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. It's a big, very busy day down there in Annapolis that day, so thank you.
It is, and I would really encourage all the members to attend. I know Paul and I, we try to do the logistical part, but really we tend to sit back, and the best voices and ways to react and to impact legislators is when, our elected officials, as well as, just everyday community citizens that come down each year can go and tell their real stories. I think Emily's first year made a great connection with Delegate McIntosh with some of the issues with the opioid use. It was really nice that you had that kind of one-on-one direct response to some issues. And so, again, we just try to keep the trains running on time and everybody knowing what rooms to go to and where they need to be. But, we really have to thank our delegation and our members of the coalition and the members that come down to the reception each year, who really are the voices that speak well for this community.
It's on my calendar, so
All right,
thanks.
great.
Anybody else? Appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, if anything comes up last minute, or you have an issue that pops up that we weren't expecting, we try to close the agenda and get everything prepared, because that's how things work, but it still is fluid. It doesn't mean we can't, if something arises last minute, we can't always work to add it, so just keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right, next up is the preliminary agenda review. Next Tuesday, Councilmember Metzner will have the invocation, we'll do the pledge
Mr.
of
Mayor,
the
if I
flag.
can just note that maybe you all consider me the best invocationer here, but I did the invocation last month.
I thought you did.
I did.
But
You did it so well.
So I don't know who's next up.
You do a really good job.
Why did we go out of order?
Donna.
Oh, it was a mistake, okay, so that means that it's Emily's turn?
It will be you next week.
I always do December.
As long as that mistake doesn't result in me.
I will look at the schedule and get it done.
Okay, we'll figure it out. All right,
It won't be Lou.
but we will have a pledge of the flag.
We know who won't be doing it next week.
It will not be Lou. We'll have announcements. The meeting dates in November are the 6th, 13th, and 20th. The work sessions at 4 p.m. And then the regular session on the 27th at 7 p.m. We'll have some guests, Carried to Council Week. We'll have Carolyn Brooks here, the founder and director of Carried to Council. We'll have some appointments to the Hagerstown Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. We'll have citizen comments, city administrative comments, mayor and council comments. We'll adopt the minutes of September 11th, 13th, 18th, and the 25th. And on the consent agenda, stop me if you have any questions. Under Public Works, the first is bulk road salt, Morton Salt, Inc., Chicago, Illinois, for $61.95 a ton. And then we have Christmas garland lights and shipping, creative displays, Stillwell, Kansas, for $16,712.50. Under utilities, we have for the wastewater UV bulbs and quartz sleeves from Suez Treatment Solutions, Leonia, New Jersey, for $42,048.10. We didn't spend much money this time. Under unfinished business, we have the approval of an ordinance, the smoking changes, the approval of an ordinance prohibiting sales of goods and services, and the approval of an ordinance prohibiting soliciting in the parks. Under new business, we have the introduction of an ordinance to amend the city code, chapter 173-5, peace and good order, for public exhibition at dangerous elevations. We have the approval of resolution, Drinking Water Bond Series 2018A and Drinking Water Bond Series 2018B for the R.C. Wilson traveling screen replacement and pump station improvements. The approval of a motion to amend the incentive programs. The approval of mayor and council goals of 2018-2020, which we'll talk about this evening. The approval of the Maryland Department of Transportation Bicycle Grant Agreement. The approval of proposed stadium improvements for the 2019 season, which we'll talk about this evening. The approval of Invest Hagerstown City Center Redevelopment Grant Application for 54 South Potomac Street. The approval of Invest Hagerstown City Center Redevelopment Grant Application for 21 West Franklin Street. The approval of the utilization of wastewater division funds to fund Sinagro wastewater treatment plant sludge thickening project and dryer rebuild project. And the approval of City Center holiday parking program. Any questions on the consent agenda? Okay, great. Moving on, 2018 Hagerstown Ice and Sports Complex Annual Report.
Good afternoon. Tis the season where the ice rink board comes in and presents to us their annual report and their goals for the upcoming year. So Paul Sweeney continues to serve as the chairman. The board is, I think, doing a really nice job of improving the rink, the operations of the rink, and we appreciate, they're all volunteers, and we really appreciate their time and what they do there. So Paul has a PowerPoint he'd like to present to you, and feel free to ask any questions as we go through it.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us here. This is our annual report, so it's on PowerPoint, but you also should have a copy in your packet. And hopefully this thing works. Yeah, right here. This shows the different user groups that we have at the rink. You can see it's got the sled hockey program, public skate, it's our adult hockey program. We have a youth rec program, figure skating, and that's some of the leagues. I'm not sure if that's, I think it looks like a youth league, but I'm not sure. What is HIAAA? It's the Hagerstown Ice Amateur Athletic Association. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization made up of all the different user groups that use the rink. Each member group has a voting member on the board. There are 4 at-large members also holding voting rights, and the group was created in 2014, and we formally took over on April 1, 2014, and completed our 3rd fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30th, so we just completed, I guess, the 2017 one and June 30th of 2017. This gives you some numbers. Public skate revenue was up in 2018. A little cheat sheet here. We brought in about $161,000 worth of revenue just from public skating alone last year. See, it was up from the year before. We have 18 adult hockey teams that play on a regular basis. We have 6 teams in what we call our upper division, 10 teams in our recreational division. We have an all-female travel team, and we have a sled hockey team. We have actually 3 different seasons. We have a fall season that we're right in the middle of right now, a winter season, and also a summer season. And last year, we had over 700 adult hockey players that registered to play. And people probably are surprised by that number.
Yeah.
We have 7 youth hockey teams through the Hagerstown Youth Hockey Association, 2 different high school teams. We have the Washington County North Stars, and we have a relatively new high school team called the West Virginia Vipers. They play in a league out of Frederick, but they practice in our facility. We have 3 youth development programs. We have power skating, which kind of teaches them to move up a level to get better. We have the Learn to Play Hockey program. That's something we have in affiliation with the Washington Capitals. You can see at the bottom. We have 50 sets of equipment that were donated by the Washington Capitals to the kids. I think their ages 5 through 9. We also have a youth recreational league that we just started about 2 years ago. And we have over 280 youth hockey players that use the rink on a regular basis. There's 2 different figure skating programs. We have the Hagerstown Edge Learn to Skate program and the Hagerstown Edge Figure Skating Club. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 figure skaters that use the rink on a regular basis. This is kind of like our floor plan. We meet monthly. We analyze the separate rink functions to continue to be examined by the board members. Registration, ice usage, concessions, advertising, maintenance. Recommendations are made at the monthly board meetings. The board members chair subcommittees to ensure fair workload and input from each one of the user groups. We have a new ticketing system that was implemented in the last year to alert management of items that might be in disrepair. The physical state of the ice and the boards is very good. We've taken the ice out and put it back in. I think, Dan, has it been 3 years in a row now? Yes. Okay. So we've taken it out annually, put it back in. It's good to do it. We don't like it to go any more than 2 years, but it gives us the opportunity to do a lot of repairs during that time. Current state of the Hagerstown Ice Sports Complex and HI AAA is all bills as of September of 2018 are current. New network hardware was set up to enhance security and safely offer Wi-Fi for guests. We purchased a new Zamboni, which is one of the reasons why we had the agreement extended by City Council, which we're very grateful for. But we've got it. It's up and running. It works. Dan, I think, is very happy with it. We're in the process of hiring a new general manager. Our current GM is moving to a different area. And I'd like to introduce Matt McIntosh. He's going to step in to be the new general manager. We've got to get him approved by the board, but that's we're having a meeting this week. So, and again, we operate in the black. We're not, the only debt we have is on the Zamboni, and it's pretty much about halfway paid for at this point. We just got it this summer. So. Protecting the rink via reinvestments, accurate reporting, predictable financial forecasting, proper forecasting, preventive maintenance. I can't tell you how much we examine this every month at the meetings. We give Rodney an up-to-date report financially, how we're set, different things that Dan has been instrumental in making sure that all our equipment is operating at its peak. It's been very, very good. In the future, these are a couple things that we're looking at doing. We'd like to enhance the current alarm system that we have in the building. We just projected that's probably a $30,000 cost. And then the Freon system that we have, we've been going back and forth trying to figure out how we're going to do that. But the facility was built in '97. It has an older style Freon. At some point, we're going to convert to a newer style, but we just haven't done that at this point. Looking ahead, this is our vision for 2018, 2019. Community partnerships, Washington County Public Schools, we have flyers go out. The City of Hagerstown, we give discounts for any employees that participate in the leagues. Parks and Rec Department program listings, we advertise in Parks and Rec program. We're partnering with local businesses to offer discounts for visitors. And we're trying to get the roller hockey, the outdoor rink, up and running. The capital spent a lot of money. It's a beautiful facility, but we just haven't been able to get it to catch on yet and get some outdoor rink programs going, but it'll happen. This is our vision. I think this is the last slide. We want to add a second sheet of ice. We're at capacity right now. The ice is being used, very little ice time available. We'd like to get more teams, more individuals to participate. We have a subcommittee that has met over the last 2 years to figure out exactly how we're going to get the second sheet, and we have some pretty exciting ideas that you're going to hear about soon, where we think we can incorporate some indoor soccer facilities as well. It's a great opportunity in this area, and we feel that our design is probably the most cost-effective. So, but you'll find out about that soon. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you.
I'd just like to point out a couple things that really weren't on the slide. Our revenue from 2016 to 2017 jumped. We brought in a little bit over $500,000 fiscal year ending 2016, which was June 30th of 17, $501,000. In the last year, we brought in $576,000. So we're really making as good a use as we can out of this, and hopefully it's going to be even more, next year. But we're really at capacity right now. I can't stress how, if we had a second sheet of ice, it'd take a couple of years to get it going, but it's going to work.
Do you have any donors on the horizon as a 501(c) that would be able to fund the second sheet of ice?
Yeah, we're working on that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a few people that are interested.
Good.
What we're looking to do with the second sheet of ice is, and Victus, when they did their study, pretty much said that it's going to have to be some sort of a public-private partnership. So we've already reached out, and we're going to start a fundraising campaign once we actually are given permission to move forward with this. And we'd like to get, obviously, some help from the city. We're going to look at the county as well, and even the state of Maryland for funding.
But just to clarify, there has not been a fundraising project started already. And
No.
the reason I asked that is because when Harold Mail wrote the article about his frustration that we were operating in silos, I mean, we were like attacked over and over and over again, that there was some perception that we were impeding your growth. And I know, speaking only for myself, who grew up in that ice rink, I've always been an advocate for a second sheet of ice. I know we need one. We needed one when I skated. So I know we definitely need one now. But I think the frustration was, we're working on a study for an indoor sports facility. Then we learned through the paper that you guys are working on the same thing. We should be working together. But then we were getting feedback from people at the ice rink that we were hurting your fundraising efforts and all kinds of stuff. And to our knowledge, there wasn't any fundraising efforts going on.
No,
So
we
I'm not
haven't.
sure why
We
that
haven't, no.
perception was there.
We haven't started anything. What we would like is permission to actually build it at that site, and then that would allow us to go out and start raising some funds. We don't, it's difficult to get a commitment from somebody if you don't know if it's going to be there or not.
Sure.
So that's what we're looking for.
Are you looking at permission from the city ahead of the completion of deliberations on the Victus process, or are you looking at it in concert with that?
Kind of in concert, I would say. I mean, we have several ideas for fundraising, and we've talked to quite a few people about, for example, naming rights or even memberships, for the facility as well.
But are you waiting for conclusion of that process to come in with formal requests for permission to proceed?
No, we're going to submit an
Yeah, they're gonna respond to the RFQ.
And, okay, so let's say that goes some other direction. I guess my question is, you're gonna wait till the conclusion of that process, if it goes that direction or some other direction, to come in and ask for formal permission to proceed with the second sheet of ice?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you wouldn't do both at once.
I would think.
Yeah.
If they're selected as being the best alternative for the indoor sports facility, then obviously that's the way we go. If they're not, then I think they would come in after that.
Yeah. I mean, our idea is, is to not only have the ice community, for lack of a better word, but also get the soccer community involved, the indoor lacrosse community involved as well, and get everybody on board with fundraising efforts. So,
I think it's a great idea in theory. I think that the gentleman that was here that did the study was saying that it won't work because of the precipitation on the ice, and that it hasn't worked, and that other joint facilities across the country, like ice and swimming, there was a lot of those, that they're no longer doing them because of the problems that it caused the infrastructure. So I think, only me, I would be totally on board with that. I think it's a good idea to marry all of those entities, but does it work? I'm not an engineer.
We've talked to a gentleman that is involved with building ice rinks, and he said it would not be an issue at all. So, we're gonna explore it a little bit more, but he hasn't seen our concept and our design, but he said it shouldn't be an issue. The Kettler Ice facility that's in where the Washington Capitals practice, Northern Virginia, their ice rink is on the 8th floor of a parking deck. And to my knowledge, there's no issue with water, mold, or anything on the other floors of the parking deck. So, yeah, I'm not an engineer either, but all the engineers I've talked to pretty much said it's not an issue. Now, the issue would be the cost. If it triples the cost.
It's gonna require special air handling to mitigate the precipitate, or the moisture issue and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm gonna defer a little bit to Dan, but our current facility, when it was built, we have a moisture issue in there right now. There's, especially in the summertime, condensation builds up, there's a lot of drips that come down from the ceiling, and primarily, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to do with the dehumidifiers that we have in there. They weren't the right size dehumidifiers. And I don't know what was spent on them or how they were put in, but we'll make sure that we have all the proper equipment, in place that's gonna prevent that from happening moving forward.
Different technology today.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technology in the ice facilities has changed dramatically just over the last 5 to 10 years. Stuff that we can do now, literally today, as we couldn't do 5 years ago, definitely couldn't do 15 years ago. There's a lot of things that I do daily that people were doing 30 years ago. It just all depends on exactly what we're talking about, what we want to do.
Any other questions?
I will put in a plug for Dan. I think the ice rink is successful in large part due to him and the maintenance work that he does there all the time. They're really fortunate to have somebody of his talents there.
Well, thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Rodney, proposed stadium improvements for the 19th season.
Travis Painter, the general manager, Sons, is here with me tonight. Did you have a few things you wanted to go over first? Or?
Yeah, just had a quick recap, I guess, of the 2018 year for us. Like everybody, this summer, being the wettest summer it's been in quite some time, really affected us. Out of our 70 games that we had scheduled, we had 56 total openings, so we had 14 rainouts, which was about 20% of our season. That led us to a total of 64,957 fans, which is obviously down a little bit from last year. But when you're losing that many games, you're expecting to be down a little bit there. Our average fans were pretty close to our 2016 numbers, down a little bit from 2017. We averaged 1,160 fans a game. Along with the 14 rainouts, we had 28 games that were affected by either rain or snow this year. which was about 40% of our season. Outside of that, we accounted for about 1,725 total hotel room nights this season. That includes rooms for players when they first come into town, visiting teams, and umpires. That's directly through us. It doesn't account for any other player families coming to visit, or visiting team players' families coming to visit, or anyone directly coming into town to stay overnight to see a Suns game. This year, we were able to donate nearly $50,000 in-kind and monetary donations. We had over 150 hours of staff and player donated time to the community through different organizations and different events. Outside of Hagerstown Suns, I guess, scheduled games, we were able to host quite a few special events. We hosted the South County Little League Opening Day ceremonies on April 4th. We hosted 4 high school games this year. We hosted Smithsburg versus Williamsport, Goretti versus Grace Academy, South versus Williamsport, and Heritage Academy hosted their playoff series at the stadium as well. In conjunction with RBC Wealth Management, we hosted a shredding event there at the stadium in the parking lot. Waynesboro Legion hosted a game there. Mountain Valley National Adult Baseball Association, which is mainly out of West Virginia, hosted their All-Star game at the stadium this year. We actually just held a wedding on the field on September 29th. Hosted the 4th annual Stablemates Trunk or Treat on October 6th. This past weekend, we hosted the 2nd annual Chili Cook-Off in conjunction with What's Next and the Herald Mail, which Emily was at. We host this weekend. We have 2 events. We are hosting Hope Day, which is put on by Lifehouse Church. They host that in the parking lot, and then we open up the stadium so they can use the bathrooms as well. And then once they are done at 2 o'clock, Hub City Home Run Derby, which is a charity softball event, is being held at the stadium starting at 2:30. They originally scheduled for September, but again, rain affected that as well. And then we have the electronics recycling event coming up on November 3rd as well in the parking lot. So that's just a quick kind of recap of what we had going on around the stadium and with the team this year.
So
I'm not gonna ask how your year was as far as wins, losses.
The wins and losses weren't very good this year.
So the lease agreement, the Fifth Amendment that we approved last April, requires the city to spend up to $35,000 in upgrades to the stadium. So Travis and I get together in September and determine what all is needed. And we have a pretty lengthy list here before you of things that, from their perspective, need to be done to improve the play of the facility and also the fan experience. Then we have a list as well of things that we take care of there at the stadium, such as roofs and HVAC systems. So I think the amendment basically puts it on this body to make the final decision on how we want to spend that money. So Part A of my memo lays out what the Suns have requested, and you can go through those yourself, and I tried to provide pictures where applicable. The second list, Part B, is some of the things that we're seeing there that need to be done. So the total of all those is far more than what we have available. So what we would suggest is that we do their top priorities. I would suggest the top 4, and then the HVAC system in the team store is almost completely not functioning anymore, and we need to start addressing some of the roofs down there. So I'm not saying we do all the roofs, but I think we ought to at least start doing maybe with one, and that would spend about $35,000. We also made some other improvements at the stadium this year, where we seal coated the parking lot and restriped it. And then also we had a major flood event based kind of similar to what Travis was saying earlier on August 21st, where the clubhouse got flooded, and we had some cleanup expenses there we have to deal with, too. So that's kind of where we're at. Our recommendation, my recommendation is that we proceed with the items that are in bold, A 1 through 4 and B 1 and 2.
Can I only suggest that under A, item number 6, maybe we don't have to replace some of those tables, but we should at least go replace some of the boards that are on those tables that are really bad. I mean, some of the seats are really, really horrible.
We can do that.
I mean, that way you're not replacing all the tables, you're just replacing parts that make it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Try to show it in one picture.
yeah, last one, another,
Like a ski.
yeah, there's quite a few like that, yeah.
So in terms of improvements, we spent $45,000 on the parking lot, resealing and restriping, and then we had $14,248 on the flood cleanup in the clubhouse. Where do those funds come from? And is the parking lot not an improvement?
Yeah, I think it's an improvement. The pavement preservation program we pave all our streets, parking lots. So it's typical every year we do, bulk of that money goes to the public streets. But we also try to deal with our public parking lots, especially in the parks. So this year we did Funkhauser Park, we resealed the ice rink, and we resealed the stadium. Other years we've done like the golf course parking lot. And that's all funded out of that program, which is highway user revenue.
Okay,
And the lease doesn't cover the parking lot.
it does not.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And it's probably the first money that's been spent on that parking lot in decades.
Oh, I know, yeah.
The cleanup would have to come out of our operating budget.
Out of the general fund?
Parks.
Or the parks?
Yeah, it would be the general fund.
Okay. And then some of the items on there, have those already been competitively bid? I always stagger a little bit when I see like, 12,000 for carpet.
They will be competitively bid. If you say this is the list, those items on there will be, we follow our procurement policy for each one of them.
Okay, so that's not a hard, fast number
No, we
yet.
just got ballpark numbers at
Gotcha.
this point.
The only other question is, that area floods all the time. And so, why carpet in the clubhouse? Why not something that's a little more impervious to water that wouldn't, next year when we have the flood, we don't have another $12,000 hit? And the other thing is, I see it's down low on the list, fixing the roof on the clubhouse, and I can see the picture. It looks like where the leak is coming through the ceiling is directly across from where the carpet's bubbling up. So why wouldn't the roof be a higher priority than the carpet?
Well, I think, I'm suggesting that we start spending some money on roofs. So $6,000 could be used towards the clubhouse, could be used towards the one little concession stand, could be used towards the team store. We need to start addressing that.
And
You want to speak to the carpet?
The part with the carpet is more of a Nationals or minor league baseball mandated type thing. There was rubber in there at one point, but I think the problem that happened is the last time it got changed out to carpet, they didn't take the rubber up when they did it, and the rubber is what's bubbling up and causing the carpet to also come up as well, because the rubber is all in one piece, and then as it starts to come apart, it starts to bubble up and cause issues throughout the entire thing. The carpet itself wouldn't be an issue with the bubbling if the rubber wasn't underneath it as
So
well.
the flooding, it was, ServPro was able to dry it out enough?
Yeah. It's just been 5 years or so, I think, since the carpet has been changed out, and with the amount of traffic and stuff that goes through there, and the carpet squares, it gets torn up in some areas, and then the wear and tear of 30 guys going through there on a daily basis kind of tears it up as well.
Okay.
No, they don't wear their cleats into the clubhouse.
Are you sure?
I can guarantee you they don't.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, so if we're good with that, then we'll wait to see some real hard numbers on the things that we bid out.
Right. I'd like to have you approve the list next week at the voting session, and then we'll move forward.
Not a problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
Preliminary budget of general fund agency contributions.
Good evening. Hello, hello.
Hi, haven't seen you in a while.
I know.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's hard to believe, it's already October. Jennifer and our great accounting team are diligently still in the midst of final stages of audit and preparing our CAFR, but this evening we are here with a different hat because, unbelievable as it sounds, we're gearing up as soon as the CAFR is out the door to hit the ground running with the budget season. And one of the very first things that we need to do by the policy that was adopted is any general fund agency contributions. Two big questions every year. And we have to, myself and/or representative from accounting, come and sit and get from this body preliminary direction. We know things may change between now and when the budget comes back March 31st. And again, things may change from April 1st until May 30th. So the two big questions in the way that the policy is drafted for us to get direction is, one, there are a listing of certain agencies where we are guaranteeing to fund. We need to review that list of agencies and ensure that those are still, at one point we called them core organizations, which I think upset some, but there was very specific definitions that this body gave and outlined. And then once we decide if those are the agencies that we're still guaranteeing, what happens next steps is in November, my group sends out memos, we send out the policy, we send out a form and give deadlines. So from November to the first or second Friday in January, these agencies have an opportunity to complete the form and send us all of their financial information that's required and get it back to us to incorporate it into our budget. Aside from those agencies, then, the other big question this evening is, in the policy, we have set aside $205,000 on an annual basis, again, preliminarily to start a budget process. That means that it's an indication for both myself and the city administrator that when we come in March, we need to try to do everything possible that it is included in our balanced budget for this body to consider. The $205,000 is split. $195,000 goes across the 8 identified agencies at this point. There's a $10,000 that goes as unspecified to allow throughout the year for other agencies and other direction by the staff to give to other agencies. So, first and foremost, before we look at the policy and I asked the two questions, I attached a spreadsheet, and this was just to give us an idea, a little bit of history on the agencies that are identified per the policy are at the top, in case anybody's wondering. And so we give an annual allotment, and then the second half of the spreadsheet was anything above and beyond, almost like this annual allotment that we provided in the agencies that we gave them to. It includes as far back as fiscal year 15 through where we ended fiscal year 18. It includes a column for our current fiscal year 19 budget, as well as if there are no changes beyond this policy, plus what we approved as a motion, which was to fund specifically for the museum, a extra $10,000 annually, fiscal year 19, 20, and 21 for their HVAC project. So that's the split in the detail that you see before you. The agencies, we just want to go through them, are Community Rescue, Hagerstown Municipal Band, H&DP, also known as the Home Store, Maryland Symphony Orchestra, the Maryland Theater for Operational Needs, Washington County Art Museum, Washington County Free Library, and the Washington County Historical Society. It is one When we originally did the policy, there were 7 identified groups. We came back a year or so after that and added the Washington County Historical Society. Right now, and looking forward and keeping an amount out for both contingency and an extra 10,000 for the museum, I have assumed that we would take and reduce the Historical Society to 0 and then reduce all the other areas. And again, this evening isn't about making decisions on the actual allotments for fiscal year 20 and 21, just do we guarantee for the 7 to 8 agencies, and do we come back with 205,000 as a starting place? So first and foremost,
I-
Go.
For me, I don't have a huge opinion at this moment about the Historical Society. I'm fine with everything else. All I'm saying is I would suggest you just make them even, and return community rescue to 45, make H&B 27, the symphony 17, and the museum 40 even, and the library 30 even. I'm trying to simplify the numbers. I don't think they're gonna miss the couple $100.
Should we go around first, though, and discuss, are these the core agencies that we want to fund? You know, what's a one-liner for each one of these? Why is it good? Why are we funding it? Why are the taxpayers paying for it? I mean, some of them are obvious, others may not be. They're not to me.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ones you wanna get rid of, I'm open to hearing.
Well, community rescue services definitely need it. My understanding was they're running a huge surplus right now. Do they need the funding?
Yes, they need the funding.
Okay.
Yes.
So they are not running a surplus then?
No, they're running the majority of their calls in the city of Hagerstown and multiple times, so they're not billing. You know, most people have Medicaid, they get $100 flat, whether they run them once or 4 times or 5 times, and I definitely would suggest funding that,
Keeping it at the 45,000?
yes.
Yeah, but that wasn't my question. My question was, do they have a surplus?
I don't know if I can give you that information. I don't know if their financial information is public. Is it?
Yeah, it is, sure it is.
we can bring back the information that they provided to us last January. I can send it out, as
I
an
ask for it,
email.
I don't want to give someone's financial information out if I'm not
I think-
supposed to.
I understand.
Well, I just asked if there was a surplus, I mean,
The only reason I'm asking is, you know, if there's a need, and I would rather give money to an organization where there's a crying need than to one where there's not, or, you know, because we're gonna look at this from a year-to-year basis. And that could be taking money away from something else that we want to give more money to, or another program that we might want to add to this.
One of the things getting with CRS, most candidly, is they have a nice reserve fund. And they will tell you appropriately that they need a reserve fund for capital improvements. But that's similar to what we're having our discussion about right now about a parking fund, isn't it? So, you know, do we say we don't raise our parking rates, but we give the CRS? And I think the issue is we need to see their financials, and if they are not to be public, then we see them in a closed session.
For me, I don't really care whether they're running a surplus or not. I think the base question for me is whether or not you basically donate to the rescue service that largely serves your community. No different than I look at Boonesborough and say, does Boonesborough give money to Boonesborough Ambulance, or does Hancock give money to Hancock, rescue service, et cetera? I think for me, it's a more philosophical question of whether you provide funding to that entity that's providing that quasi-governmental function or not. And so I see these services at the top as more of, if they didn't do it, would we be doing it in some form? And I think the answer is yeah, we would.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying, or advocating cutting it out. I'm just asking the question.
I mean, I'm happy to take
Is
them
it
down to
necessary?
40 and keep the 5 for Historical Society if that's was somebody's preference, but I think that.
As soon as we look at it when we get down to looking at it.
Yeah, yeah, the amounts, I was just thinking, let's go through and say, are these the 8
Yeah, I have no
agencies?
problem with these being the agencies, personally.
So the municipal band,
I think, for me, that's
You're a
in
big
our,
supporter.
yeah, I'm a big supporter.
Yeah,
I think you just go out on Sunday nights and you see
I
why.
need to take you up on that. I need to,
oh, yeah, I mean,
It's on
you
mine.
can't
it's on my list.
Yeah,
go down Virginia Avenue without,
yeah.
and the Hagerstown Home Store.
Now, somebody can have that discussion with me. That,
Well, that was a question I had, because we've been down the road a couple of times in discussions in our goal-setting sessions and whatnot, that we've got that, charter, I think it was number 8 on the key items list for, the city is supporting home ownership. But then we were talking about, is that really something we want to do? We were talking about millennials don't want to buy houses anymore. We're basically a city of renters, so $27,500, what are we spending that for?
I will say they do a lot, they do the credit counseling and home ownership for first-time home buyers. They do the classes that allows you to get this assistance, and they encourage people to buy homes. They have been working with Jonathan and also with Main Street about perhaps being the grant, where they pass the grants through, since they are a 501c3. And I think it's a really, really good opportunity for partnership. They had a new director, Morgan, that took over about a year ago, and they have a very, very active board. It's probably the most productive board, that meeting that I go to. They want to partner with the city. We had a meeting with Valerie and staff a few months ago, and they've been working ever since with Main Street and to try to get everyone on the same page with a common goal of developing neighborhoods, because that's what it was focused on. So I think for some time, they were short an employee, and they got away from their core mission, but I believe that it's back, and it's a very worthwhile cause to have in our community.
Okay.
So is this in addition to the Invest Hagerstown? Does this kind of like go
Yes.
hand in hand? So that,
So that.
It's
that
separate.
money's
they would
plus
be,
this money's?
Yeah. This
Yes.
has nothing to do with the investigator money.
Correct.
This is additional down payment assistance.
correct.
So this is, okay.
And CDBG also through the CDBG fund. Now, I have not included any of the money on here. This is just what comes from the general fund. And everything at the top for these 8 organizations that are listed, I'll be honest, helps cover their administrative costs.
Okay.
well,
So that 27,000 is not used for any kind of,
This 27,000 is not,
okay.
Does not go to help homeowners, per
no.
se.
But separately through CDBG program and CDBG, and I cannot speak for going forwards because there's a whole separate process with CDBG in order to get that money, and there's an external committee that votes on that. But I don't know if Jonathan's behind me or not, if he snuck out earlier. CDBG also gives money, but it is directly for that, for ownership, and I don't know if they help
Yeah.
out with emergency repairs or not. The money here is totally separate.
and I think when you list HNDP and then put home store after it, in parentheses, that's all you think is the area home ownership, generating entity or facilitating entity, and that is not their sole purpose.
They also do foreclosure assistance to keep people in homes.
I believe they're also the entity that held the note on BISFA originally, right?
I think they passed all that. They were one of the ones because they were a 501c3.
Yeah.
So it was a whole big triangle, which has since been paid off, but yes.
Okay.
And I think originally these 8 were determined, and Councilmember Metzner and Alshire can help with that. A lot of the ones at the bottom, it came down to, it was very stressful. Coming back at budget time, we spent a lot of time every April. And when I say stressful, it could have been 2 weeks on doing nothing but, who do we want to give to? How much are we going to
But they were also very
give?
singular, they were small, they would ask for them sporadically, and so that's why we created the 10, to say, look, Children's Village, if you got something you want us to provide funding to in some year, you know, that's a $1,500, then just ask, don't. Otherwise, what we got into was we just kept adding more and more agencies, and it would get it one year, and they go, oh, well, they got it last year, well, just put it in this year. And then 4 years down the road, everybody forgets how it even got there to begin with. You just know you were giving people $2,500 and $4,000, then $5,000, then $6,000, and it was a way to reverse course from that automation.
So when the Discovery Station is asking for their $2,500
Now's the perfect time.
for
Now's an
that
ample opportunity to
pledge.
bring it up. So the Discovery Store was asking for a pledge that was
Discovery
over
Station,
3
yeah.
years, right?
2,500 over 3 years for their city display.
And I think as much foot traffic as they've brought in and as much as they've turned around in the last 2 or 3 years, and they've been doing a lot for the community, I would support that.
I definitely would support that. I think that,
Is that the kind of thing, that, do we want to put that in as a line item for the next 3 years, or do we want to fund that out of a contingency fund? That was my point on the, you know, some of the amount, that was the big one there on community rescue services. Not saying we don't give them
Right.
that, but, you know, is that some, can we build a bigger contingencies fund so we can react to the Discovery Station when that comes up in the middle of the year and all of
Yeah.
a sudden there's a need?
I have no problem putting Discovery Station in for the next 3 years, if that's what everybody wants to do.
But not as, but what he's saying is not as a core agency,
Right.
just
Right.
just one of the,
Right.
you're gonna
Same
fund
as I see as
it, just like you
workshops.
did with,
So,
yeah.
are you saying you put it in?
Not as a core
I-
agency.
Yeah, I get that, but are you then taking the 10 down to 7,500?
Yes.
Yeah.
You would take it from there.
Okay, that, I'm fine if you're doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Instead
get to
of
see their
reducing-
financials too?
Yeah, they would
What's
have to
that?
turn in,
yeah, they all have to do
Okay,
an
I just wanted to
application,
make
it
sure.
looks
I
like.
I didn't know if we were gonna require that for the contingency fund that we're gonna use.
I think we would, right?
And at any point, per the policy and the way everything is written, at any point, any of these agencies could come and give a presentation. Now, I say that annually, every year, we are invited to go to the museum for their annual presentation as well as to the library for their annual presentation. They both do that religiously.
So, and each of these organizations, they just basically give a paper application like they've done since 2015, is that right?
Correct, and then they also separately will send budget if it's a large enough organization and has a budget, as well as their audited financial statements.
Okay. Yeah, I have no problem with Discovery Stations. So we'll take the contingency down to 7,500 over the next 3 years to fund that. Then the Symphony Orchestra, 16,550. And that's for administrative items, or?
That would be the only one I would have to go back and really take a good look at the information that they send. I don't think that they have a lot of administrative overhead costs. Theirs is more cost of,
I mean, maybe it would be
Putting on
interesting to look at
performances.
things like that, because if we're gonna talk about, do they have a surplus, or where, you know, what
What's
is,
the
what
need?
is the impact on their budget, instead of just a number.
Yeah.
You may know them, but for us to see just a number, $16,000 may be nothing to the Symphony Orchestra, but it may be a lot to the Discovery Station, or it may be a lot to the Symphony Orchestra. And, you know, it would just be interesting to compare the need.
Is it reasonable to ask them to come and do a presentation? Because, I mean,
yes, and we actually, I think, per the policy, indicate that.
yeah, I mean, I would much rather see, I mean, unless we can look at the applications, you know, I'm just, unfortunately,
And
I've never.
we can always, in January, that's also another item that can certainly be done is when we get and receive everything in January. It was the prior administrative group didn't want to necessarily have several copies made and distributed it publicly of the documentation that came in. It's a lot.
Sure.
The groups didn't, or the city did?
The prior mayor and council didn't necessarily want to see all that in January, and if presentations were going to be asked I think at one point they preferred that the groups actually come in and kind of do that.
Yeah, I think it's only fair as administrations change that, you know,
Sure.
that we can, you know, make our own decisions as to how we allocate these funds,
And
honestly.
I think basically it's necessary to look at what the need is, have them come in and
Absolutely.
explain what they're.
Yeah.
What they're.
Or even not necessarily I don't mind if they come in, but even just something we can read, see, compare numbers
either
to.
some-
Yeah.
Either a presentation or a publication or something.
The band can play here.
The
I mean,
band
I'm
can
okay with
come
that.
in.
Whatever.
Sure. Okay.
Right, Lou? You'll like that.
And we have time between now and budget adoption for.
Also, it's great to do this now.
for them. Now, again, the museum and the library have already provided that information for last year, and they had us come and sit. The Maryland Theater's been in a couple times. Do you wish them to do anything else more administratively or operationally?
Well, we just had a presentation from Jessica last week, you know, we kind of know what, right?
Well, I don't know,
Is she-
this says operational needs.
The 9,000 is
Okay.
operational,
Yeah.
to
I'm just-
utilize
That's true.
in their operating budget, in any line item they see.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the municipal band, I think, you know, welcome to have them come in, but the answer to them is we're their sole funding source. There is no other funding source for the municipal band. So,
That's what I mean, but
Yeah.
that's a need.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that
Right.
is it. That's how they exist.
It's always good to know who you're giving money to, so.
So it sounds like we want to keep the 8 as the organizations that are identified, keep the 8 as they are right now in the existing policy. Big question, do we want to keep the funding? So right now, we're saying flip it back around and do 195 between the core agencies and leave the 10 below.
Well, we already took, we leave the 10 below, but we're already taking 2,500 out of it.
I understand, but we also already did a separate motion above and beyond what we give to the museum to give them this additional 10,000 for their HVAC project. So if we don't want to take that out of the other, that would mean the policy needs to rate 185 for core identified, and then another 20, and we don't have, because in the policy, we don't have to specify how we're splitting that 20, we just say 20, because we separately have done motions, and then this body decides who to give the remaining balance to. Is that a fair statement? And then the grand total in the budget right now, when I come back, will be 205.
Yes.
Yes.
185 for the core 8 and 20 for the other.
Unless somebody comes back and
Right.
there's no good need for the money,
Correct.
which then we
But then we're in
can.
a different position.
Right.
Yeah, then we don't need the 205, which
And with Kristen's reductions, that doesn't reduce this, I can't remember what he said.
I just said make the numbers even.
So does that give us any more money?
No.
$1,000?
I don't think he was
500?
looking, I don't think that was your
No?
intent, correct? Your intent is to leave a little bit
It does not adjust
for,
the amount in total, that's correct.
Right.
Ah,
It just put CRS back to 45 even.
okay,
Yeah.
I gotcha. I was hopeful.
We moved to 450 and 550 between the library and the other half.
Yeah.
Right.
HNDP and the Maryland Central.
I was just trying to
Simplify.
put them at zeros.
I guess I have a question then, Michelle. If we're keeping it, if we're keeping the 8, so we're not specifically saying what we're going to give them though.
and we never do in the
Right.
policy at this point.
Okay,
But-
so then
But we do say there's 8, and it's 195,000.
Okay, so the Historical Society stays in there, and right now, it looks like they're not gonna get anything, but they might.
I don't think anybody said we're keeping the 8 at all.
Yeah, I thought that,
I
yeah. I
thought you guys said you wanted to see it to even know if you want to fund any of that.
Right, we wanted
Yeah, but
presentations.
for now, those are gonna be the 8 that we're gonna have, try to get, we're not gonna get presentations from all of these.
Not in October.
Yeah,
So right now in October, what we have to do per the
Yeah.
policy is say, are we keeping the listing of the agencies, yes or no?
yes,
And how much are we doing?
in grand total.
Correct.
Not specifically.
So I think probably it sounded like just leave the 8 in the policy for right now, because right now, we only have one more week in October. We really aren't in a position to say who we would change them to, and leave it at 185. And I will just, when I send the memos out in November, I will still say, you know, this, and they say that every single year, that there is nothing finalized
Yeah, no.
until you receive notification back. by the end of May, once the budget's adopted.
Yes, 185 and 20510, yes.
Okay. And I'll try to even those dollars out by the time we come back at the end of March.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautification of railroad overpasses.
So when I was here a couple weeks ago, what I understood is you wanted to have a few more ideas on what to do specifically with the Antietam Street bridges. Remember, they're the ones that, on the south side, the bridge abutment, the structure itself is set back from the back of the sidewalk about 15 feet. So we put together a couple more sketches of what it would look like to put a rock treatment there. So in the back of your packet, there is a option 6A, which shows the rock being built up at an angle under those bridges. And then at each end of the bridges, we would put probably some sort of perennial grasses or something to be very low maintenance, but it would kind of soften the edges so the rock itself would be right under the bridges. That's one idea. 6B would be to take timbers and make a frame under the bridges and fill the frame in with stone and rock. Again, it would be on a slope, and it would be a little more decorative that way because of the timbers. And then some examples of what that could roughly look like would be on the next page, where I showed 2 or 3 different types of rock, and then what the timbers themselves would look like and what it looks like when there's rock placed in between them. So those are the ideas for the rock treatment. Then Leslie Wally, who is a local artist, is here, and she and I were talking because her and her group just finished the really lovely mural out on West Memorial Boulevard. And while they were working on that, we got to talking about this issue, and she suggested just one other idea, and that would be some geometric shapes made out of concrete that could be placed under the bridges that either could be painted or, just another type of art. And I think Leslie's point was, that we should definitely consider art for these solutions, and there's many different kinds, more than the ones that I just suggested 2 weeks ago. So she quickly put together a few sketches for me, and we included those in the packet, just to kind of get your thoughts going on other things like that.
All in on the circles.
I like the circles.
All in. What?
I don't, no, I'm all in for art and color.
Is this this isn't expensive?
Well,
Everything's expensive.
everything's expensive.
I don't really have a price on those. We'd have to find a source for them first where they would actually make them. Target would be a perfect example.
That red one in the middle especially, Target.
You don't have a source for these circles?
No, I came up with the idea because you don't have sharp corners, and they kind of.
Makes
more
sense.
attractive. But actually, when I went to a local concrete supplier, they actually said, we can't do spheres, so.
Well, I like the angled rock in the first picture.
I am an absolute no on that. I
The
mean, if
what?
we're not gonna do the circles or something artsy, I think we should make it artsy, because we're gonna do the rest of the underpasses with art, so why wouldn't we wanna match it? If we're gonna have students paint and stuff like that. But if we absolutely have to go with rocks, I would much rather prefer the one with wood, make it look decent, but I think that we should do something like this. If all the other underpasses are gonna be.
Great too, I mean, color is what you need. The balls are great if you could have them fabricated, I don't know how you do it.
I mean, I like these the best. What?
I would love to see us do art also, something
Yeah.
very attractive. That's why going back to the previous point is like, the funds have to come from someplace. We're talking, the cheapest option is the boulders, and then we get into some sort of artwork and panels, and then we get into LED lights and all the really attractive stuff. I would love to see us, especially on, you come off of, take 70 up to 81, you're coming down 81, big sign there, visitor center this way, down historic downtown this way, you go down, and then you've got to go through the railroad overpasses. That would be the one where you want to, I think, concentrate the artwork and your.
Washington?
Yeah.
Washington and
concentrate
Franklin.
the dollars in there, because that's where people are coming into town for the first time from the interstate.
And the rest of it rock.
But, you know, do something very attractive in there with artwork. I like this idea, the geometric shapes or something.
I do too, I like that.
I would suggest, we talked about the students doing their work. I think theirs would be better suited for Franklin Street.
Yeah.
And Washington Street is longer, and maybe more professional artists could do that part. We'd have to do a call and all that stuff.
I was gonna say, we constantly have artists reach out that say they want to partner with
Yeah,
the
we do
city
a
to
call.
do that. I mean, look at what they just did, it's beautiful, so I mean, I think that's an easy fix. Or an easy ask. There are talented artists in this area who are more than willing to do that.
Are you talking about putting this underneath the underpass?
That's what you need, right? Well, there they are.
Well, I mean, I can see the pictures. I mean, I generally get the concept of what large,
This one,
colorful spheres are.
$43,
And I-
40 is triangular, 45.
Well, this one's, I mean, a definite no. I mean, that's,
Well, can I just explain, you're probably reacting to my colour choice a little bit, but at the time, we were actually in the midst of doing the mural on Memorial Boulevard, and I had to do this at the same time, and I couldn't find my paints because I was busy with 20 people trying to, the mural was my idea, and so I grabbed a paint box because I wanted to help Rodney. And, obviously, as an artist, you look at it and you see that it needs colour, it needs brightening. I thought afterwards, it would have been cool if I'd used the colours, say, of the Maryland flag and sort of done that. But my concept was that, as Rodney was saying, that it was to fill the space so that, we didn't have the problem that we have. So it needs to be fairly large because those are large spaces when you're down there.
they are.
We can't use the walls of the bridges because they belong to CSX.
I go by this place often. Probably at least 3 to 4 times a day. I'm gonna say that I'm through this area. And there's a significant number of folks, especially folks that walk with children through this area. And I mean, that, to me, like screams of liability.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just one kid hopping up on them circles, cars going past through that little chute, to get to Washington, and you're trying to watch that traffic. There's no shoulder there. I mean, it's sidewalk and street. And now you're trying to watch your kids climb on spheres, you know what I mean, while traffic's coming through. And I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, when you do this study of buyers stop and go, 725 people in a 12-hour period cross that street, right?
It was ridiculous.
Ridiculous number of folks. And I transverse that number over to this underpass, and there's always folks walking through here, to the park and back, from that sort of west, area of town. I get the idea, and I get the idea of trying to fill the space, but for me, as a person, especially, as a parent that would have to navigate that space on a regular basis, I agree that, I think you should, I agree with Austin's comment that you should focus your resources as it applies to the art component on those areas that are most heavily traveled by the incoming and outgoing folks in and out of town. This underpass doesn't serve in that capacity. It's much more local in nature, to local traveling public, to folks walking the area. And for me, I would just make it a safe
This
know,
was for,
geometric way to get through
West
there.
Washington? The one-
18th Street
This is for
That's
Antietam.
what they're talking, what he's talking.
Oh, I thought that was for
Right,
West.
am I wrong? Is this is not for Antietam?
That one, I think she's showing for Washington Street.
Yeah,
Okay,
because I was told that
Okay.
the sidewalk was 10 feet wide.
Yeah.
And you needed something to just take, and I was trying to think of something that,
all right.
Take up space.
yeah, but wasn't sharp.
I'm just, I was thinking this one Antietam,
I mean,
and it's just not.
And with,
Antietam Street needs to just be rocks. Well, this geometric crisscross thing.
yeah, so with the, because you've got two areas, so I thought we could do,
I thought that was for Antietam.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, she's there, I thought you were like, that's for
I'm
Antietam.
trying
I
to
was
find
like,
a replacement for the boulders. That's
for-
not
on,
the-
I see, so I was looking at the large concrete shapes, which, I went to Semler's, in Smithsburg, and they have things that could be used, that would, you know, see,
Antietam Street.
for Antietam, yeah.
This-
And
this
so,
type idea.
yeah,
And listen,
And I,
can I suggest to all of us? So when we, for instance, are told we can't get these things, there they are, 4-foot diameter concrete, okay?
So-
And so just so that's, it looks like it's probably $843 for 4-foot diameter. But having said that, if you do something as simple as, you know, get on the internet and Google, you'll see 15 million types of bollards, you know, that you can think of the different shapes. And the issue is you find the right shape, whether it's a big circle that you're afraid of.
I'm
or
just
some-
saying, there's a reason at the mall that the little play area that's got the vegetables that are shaped much like this stuff is foam and not rock.
this is not a play area.
Well,
It's a
all I'm saying is if you
railroad.
put this in a 10-foot space, I don't care whether it's Antietam, Washington, on that sidewalk area, that is gonna happen. 100% that's gonna happen.
But if my kids walked by that, they'd be all over those boulders.
And
Okay,
that
so-
is in much more easily, that
So-
reminds me
so-
of Harold Mail on the
Okay,
one
so-
side, which is
So
much more
just
stable in nature.
by way of example, you know, what I'm talking about is I look at something as simple as this. Okay? You don't need something that's this big, you just need something that's big enough to prevent people, right?
Right.
And again, something of this nature, with color, you have art, right?
right.
So I think what I would suggest is we ask, if the idea is that we would like it to be art and color, and we understand there's a whole lot of different options, and maybe we look at some more options yet.
Yeah, that would be helpful if
I have
that's
a
what you
question.
want.
then. This idea was for Antietam Street.
Yes, the one where there's dirt and there's the two bridges.
So in West Washington and Franklin are the panels. Is that
That's what we
right?
talked about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so we've already,
That would be a
we
mural.
decided that West Washington and Franklin are the murals,
That's
or
what we
panels.
discussed 2 weeks ago, yes.
And
What I
this
understood
other-
is you wanted to have more options for Antietam Street.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's-
And let's again come up with, make sure we have an understanding of why we're doing this. We're doing this to try to keep people from camping out and staying there, right? So what we're putting up does not necessarily have to be huge. It just has, you know, I look at it as the same thing as the little arms and the benches that just keep people from laying on the bench. And I just see a million different options that could be, that you could probably come up with.
The other question I have is, you've got, and Antietam's the city street, right?
Right.
But Washington through and Franklin,
State highway.
I mean, the state is, and I could be wrong, but I don't think the state is going to let you put certain types of what they would consider immediate impact devices within those travelways.
I didn't talk to them about concrete shapes or anything. I did talk to them about the, what we talked about 2 weeks ago, which was
The panels.
panels and the
Right.
mural,
Going
and they
on
were
those
okay with that if
streets.
it was designed correctly.
I think
those are-
all
What
the
about
bridges should be
planters?
art, except for this one.
Well, it's under a bridge.
Panels.
So you're right.
That's
All
what
of
we
them.
said,
I
right.
think all of them should be murals and art panels.
Except for
agree with that.
Antietam, that's what we
Street one.
decided on 2 weeks ago.
So I take it back about the spheres, because I thought that was for Antietam Street. I like the idea, but I thought it was for Antietam Street.
I didn't know with the spheres if they'd be big enough for Antietam, because,
Big
so
space.
that's
I mean,
why,
I like
that's why
this
I chose
idea,
the.
toned down a lot,
Okay, I mean, there's
but
a.
I like the idea of like,
So on Tina, we're going with the boulders on an angle, right?
No, you only have one person that has said that. That's me.
And you.
I mean,
I chose
does nobody
those.
else go to Target and yell at their kids every time you walk in the front door and
Kristen,
get
I
off
think
the
that there's a
red
lot of places
boulder?
where it's dangerous for
I'm
kids
just-
to walk and play. I mean, I think that, yeah, it's dangerous right along
So
City
wait a minute,
Park.
so what are you thinking about on the 18th?
This thing.
What the-
No.
Hey, man,
I think Antietam,
Why?
Antietam ought to be
Why would you?
the least cost item.
Right.
So that we can
It's the
spend
least
money.
traveled, it should be the least
So we can
cost.
spend money on Washington Street.
That's why I chose those sort of shapes, because Semlers in Smithsburg have shapes like that, that some of them, they have stood there, and they don't have to have holes in, which keeps the cost, and it was just local. I was just looking for ideas of something local that would keep the cost down. That's why I
Can-
chose those shapes.
Can I ask you a question? Could you take something like that design right there and put, it looks when you go, when you see the side of an old railroad track, and it's got the stone, and then you got the rail, and then you got the train. Could you do something that the boulders would look like that side of the track, and the mural then would be the train traveling on it?
Whew, yes, of
Where we
course.
could, where we could
Yeah.
where we put the stuff in, the physical stuff, like you're
So it
talking
looks
about.
like a trestle.
The timbers and, yeah. But then you would do your mural above it.
I don't know, we do
not
have
on
a
the
train,
wall.
we do have a
you
train
can't do
rule,
it on the wall. can
and
you?
it's a
You
CS.
can't paint on the wall because why?
It's not our bridge.
Well, wait a minute. When you say that, then why is there a mural on West Washington Street's wall?
Well, I guess at that time, they worked through the process to get their approval. We'd have to do that.
I would suggest it. I wouldn't ask.
So if we do this with the boulders like this, are we gonna cover their
Imagine
mural?
Austin.
Because it's going up against, isn't it gonna touch the,
MML thing,
There's no mural
on that one?
no.
Okay.
Ronnie, does something like this make sense as far as practicality? I mean, just as options. I like art. but-
Well, I think you'd have to have it so that you couldn't walk through it to get to the other side. That's kind of the fence option. that we
Right.
gave.
I just looking at something like this.
Oh,
Just simple, basic.
Simple.
I like art, that's what I would prefer, but again, just.
I don't think the state's gonna let you put bollards, in that area of the roadway. They're gonna see it as a blunt, I think it's blunt force object or whatever. And even when you see the guardrails, they make you put the downward, in their travel way.
but this would be okay?
What do you mean?
Any of these things?
No, I
You're
think,
saying
I
that
think on
nothing.
Washington and Franklin, I guess it is, or whatever, I think the state's gonna tell you, I think the
Panels.
state's gonna tell you
Those are only
no.
panels,
So
though.
those will be panels?
Yes.
Yeah,
So there's nothing impeding the,
but I thought he was suggesting that for for those
no,
roads.
no.
Okay.
That's
Washington,
finished
Franklin's
and
panel.
decided. Yep, that's decided, sort-ish.
And the state's already kind of pseudo-approved that.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things I saw that was a limitation on the panels was it would take months and months for the students to create the panels. But can't we put the panels up first and then, do something, I mean, you guys did in a weekend,
Yeah, but we did have nearly 6 months of rain delays, though. We were supposed to do it in the spring.
But now you got
The
a
problem when we
roof.
met with Western
Yeah.
Heights, the
Maybe.
problem when we met with Western Heights was getting kids out of class.
Mhm.
They suggested doing it over the summer.
Yeah.
But then you have to get kids to do it, so it created a host of issues having to have them on site.
But with the panels, though, I mean, just to do something that looks good day one to put it up, the panels can be changed over the year. They're not permanently mounted, they're screwed in somehow, right? So we could have the students working on panels over the summer and all that kind of stuff. Just put them up so day one, we've got the blockage, and it's not just a white painted board. It's, something that's attractive. And then, then when the students get their art, we can switch it out, and we could keep switching panels out over, different periods of time. Because you don't want to do, a student art project one time, and that's it for the rest of eternity.
Right.
So you could pick them and get it.
Okay, so on Antietam Street, we're doing boulders, right?
I hope not.
We didn't,
Keep
I don't think
trying.
in the fashion that was suggested previously. Like I said, I like that geometric shape,
And this is
I
like a
think somebody
train
came up
station
with
here.
it.
We're talking about like the middle of our city.
whatever that is.
Yeah, it's just framing the
The
rock
crisscross
with-
framing,
with
the angular
timbers.
framing.
With the wood, right? Is that the one with the wood?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I like that too.
I just think you can do that in a way that will look.
Kinda looks
I
like
think
a
you can
railroad.
do that
Artistic.
in
And I
a
think
way
you
that
put a
you're
mural
talking, and I
above it.
think that we can get CSX to approve putting a train mural on the rest of that wall. I mean, we did it with Roses for the Wild Mary down on, Burhans.
That was.
That way you'd have a little bit of,
Norfolk Southern's already given me permission to do
Yeah.
it. CSX is a bit more of a challenge.
Right. Well, I know last year they wanted paint samples and all types of stuff.
because they're so concerned about their bridge trusses, right?
Well, maybe it's a good compromise. We get art on, under 2, and we go with something reasonable under,
I'm a fan of
that
the block.
isn't, pardon me?
I'm a fan of the block. Without all that design on it.
I mean, I am too, but,
I just thought they would, they were deep and couldn't be moved, and, if you put them fairly close to the wall, people couldn't get behind, and trash wouldn't gather around, if you have lots of small pieces and, wind-blown trash.
That's why I
catching
didn't
them.
like the idea of a fence, just a fence, because debris is gonna collect back there, and then you're gonna have somebody go in every week and clean it out.
Ronnie, why don't you try to get some prices on rock and on,
these spheres.
that fit there,
Not the
and see what
spheres.
that looks like.
You said
We'll
just the
compare
block.
apples to apples.
You want the blocks or the
The
spheres?
spheres don't work on Antietam Street.
Oh, they don't work
Yeah.
on Antietam. So they're,
They could, I think.
see, they could. I'd like to see pricing on that too.
With the spheres that they don't make?
Yeah, I wasn't.
Well,
I was-
Semler's
I was
Semler's
talking
done,
about
but apparently you
these.
can
Somebody
get one.
else.
I was trying to
Found
stick close to
I was
home.
talking
because I
about
thought they'd be
the
cheap.
design.
But Kristen was saying, though, do the angled boulders, but it would be more of like a railroad track motif with the mural behind it of the train. It's still a boulder.
Get the stone done first and then do the mural later.
Or we could do panels,
I just like whatever you do.
a mural on panels and put there as opposed to painting it on the wall of
Yep.
the.
Yeah.
I think that's what. he was saying.
Don't even touch their wall.
Right, exactly, yeah. All right,
With rocks.
does that sound good then? So we can move forward on something?
Get prices on blocks
So-
and on the
Not really
boulders.
sure.
You want pricing on the spheres, the
Yeah, someone does,
shapes,
yes.
and
I
the,
like them.
and the
They're
rock work.
nice. I also don't have kids.
Okay,
But we're definitely doing panels on,
panels on Washington and Franklin.
so we can move forward with
We'll
it?
start getting working on that,
Yeah.
Start working on,
just how we're gonna make all that happen.
Yep.
The funding and everything.
Cost too, right,
Yeah.
yep.
cost, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll call the place in Smithfield.
All right, final, review of mayor and council goals and priorities that we set back in September, right? Yep.
Yes, from your meeting from September
Right.
13th. Okay, this is for your discussion this evening. I'll just kind of kick it off a little bit. Put together a document taken from the notes that all the department heads and Donna and I had from your September 13th meeting. And of course, those were the ideas that we got, that we had at least a majority on that day, that council wanted to move forward with. So what we did was put it in a document that can be used, can be adopted, can be used in our budget book, can be used, and of course, can be changed, but this would be the idea that these would be your goals and priorities for the remainder of your term. First thing we did was just set off your vision and mission statements. We really kept them basically the same, but you wanted a little change to that language, so we did that. And then I just took all of the, basically what you came up with that day, we felt were more of action items. So we wanted to kind of put them together in categories or in goal-type categories. And so that's what you see, like the first one, neighborhoods revitalization and sustainability. And then we took comments from your September 13th action items and put them under that category. So of course, this is for your review, it's your document, and you may have changed your mind from September 13th on some items, but I thought if we could go through here and see if you're in agreement with these, we can get them adopted. We don't have to rush and adopt them next week. We can take more time and review them, even at another work session. But again, this was taken from the notes from your September 13th meeting. So you could go through it however you would like this evening. And again, they were in no particular order, because you didn't really assign priorities.
So I like all the items on the first one, the neighborhood revitalization, sustainability, the strategic demolition plan with a funding model, and getting things back on the tax roll. That's,
Do you just want to go through them one by one,
I
say
think
if we're good?
That might be a good way
Yes.
for you to do that.
yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'm good with neighborhood revitalization and sustainability.
Yeah, I'm good with all those points in there.
I'm also good with public safety.
I have a problem with it.
Okay.
I don't like the first one in there, because the way I read that, it's within budget. It means we're gonna support manpower and capital needs of the police and fire, as long as it's,
As long as you approve it in your budget. So, meaning that you support that, but as the requests come to you during the budget process, you still have to fund it. You still have to be able to put it in your budget.
okay.
So the idea was there is if I had just said support manpower and capital needs, that would almost be tying you to like whatever request comes up. This is, you have it as a priority, but it still has to go through that budget process.
Okay.
That was what that language meant,
Okay.
but clearly you
Yeah,
could.
the way I read it, the biggest concern I hear day in and day out from everybody I talk to is about crime and public safety. That's the number one crying thing, and so I think one of our biggest goals has to be, how do we get the police department up to their complement of officers that they're supposed to have, and how do we fund that? And I think that's,
I think that's what the second bullet point was, about retention and recruitment. Yes.
Yeah, how do we give them the flexibility to compete with other municipalities in the region and get officers?
So the idea would be, once you do lay this out, say every section, your senior management team, we're gonna go back to the drawing board, then take these action items and then bring back ideas for you. How can we make these things happen for you? So each of those things would come back to you. Wouldn't necessarily just go do it. We're still gonna bring
But
things
the
back to you.
chief may come back and say, listen,
Yeah.
I need, an extra, bonus of $20,000 as a sign-on bonus for somebody who's doing a lateral transfer from a department in Pennsylvania or whatever.
I think we definitely need to do something like that.
Or just like how recently you reviewed the cadet program. So, I mean,
Right.
that's part of,
Right.
already part of
And if you
that goal.
talk to, as the chief said during this strategic planning meeting that we had, it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about other things. So let him and Valerie come to us with suggestions of, okay, how do we get our manpower up to what we have as sworn officers in the city of Hagerstown?
And the other thing, under public safety, I know Scott made a presentation at the meeting about our aging camera system, and I think there needs to be, there's something in there in the goal about enabling our police department to do more with technology. Yeah,
That could be included in the first line item when we talk about capital needs that come forward, so things like cameras and that sort of thing would come before you as a capital need. That's what that first bullet point could cover, but you could get more specific if you wanted as well.
I agree with that. I don't know if we need to put it as a bullet point, or if
I don't know.
you're right, it
I mean,
does
it's clear,
fall under.
it's already a focus, and it's,
Yeah.
and I believe we already have additional cameras in the budget, and it is something
Yeah.
that we are focusing on with
And
technology.
maybe, you know, some of the things, as I read through these, you know, in some cases it said, we will do this project. And in others, it was more of, this is conceptually, this is our goal.
Right.
You know, high macro level type of thing.
Right.
Not a concrete project. So cameras is a project.
Yeah,
So,
cameras would be very
yeah,
specific.
You know, enabling the police to do more with technology. That even covers the predictive policing software and all that kind of stuff. But it's a goal that we have, so maybe we don't say cameras, like we don't say some of the other things later on.
So we say something like, instead,
Or we can add a bullet point.
within budget, support the manpower and capital needs. I'm being facetious. Don't put too much thought in that, okay? All right, so we're good on that one then, right? And we know that staff will come before mayor and council, you know, during the year and definitely before budget time, and be able to
As
say,
we're-
this
as
is
we're
what we
working through
need,
this the
and
next 2
see if we
years,
can
yeah.
do it or not. That's all
Right.
within that capital needs thing.
Right.
Okay. Public facilities and infrastructure.
So everybody else we had a majority on the public safety
Yeah, I
comments?
thought we
Okay.
did, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry. I'm okay with the public facilities.
Me too.
Yeah, these were some of the larger projects, including the Breckner
Right.
Water Plant in Edgemont. Of course, paid and continued using highway user revenue. Yep. Good with that? Okay.
Economic development on the next page.
Okay, this is where we were a little bit, you were all pretty specific on the catalyst projects.
Right.
And you see where not that we wouldn't have any focus on them, but they wouldn't be a high area of focus on your catalyst project. I think it was number 4 and 7. So,
Right.
right. And then the,
On Catalyst Project number 1, it says we're going to construct the office on the central parking lot.
that was how it was originally set out in the RFP or RFQ when it was done.
Are these supposed to be in order of importance?
No, they're not,
No, they were 1 through 8 for the
no, they were just,
urban,
Okay.
That's
I
just their
wanted to
numbers
check,
in
'cause
the-
that is definitely not number
in the
one.
city center plan,
Urban
that's their
Partners
number.
plan.
Yep.
We may have discussed this I think we did talk about it, but, so the Class A offices, the offices that are in the Grand and in Professional Plaza and that will go into the Masonic Lodge, do those not fulfill Catalyst Project number 1?
no, because Catalyst Project number 1 was specifically targeted at using city-owned property to create Class A office space. And if you go as far back as 2012, it wasn't a central lot, it was actually Elizabeth Hager lot. So you could have that streetscape.
Well, that's kind of what it is. It
Right.
is really that, Mayor, you're right. It's
that
that end of
Right,
central lot.
Right. So that's why that's different than what is, and you can ask Mike, and Mike will tell you he doesn't have Class A office space.
Yeah, that's,
You know,
this-
that's
it
not
wasn't
Class
built,
A.
right. And I don't know the difference exactly on that definition.
Yeah,
Yep,
it's, there's some things.
I was just wondering, is that,
Have an old building.
do we really have a need for that? I mean,
It's one of those things like the conference center, that's low on, if someone comes along and wants to go Class A office
Right,
space, boy,
right.
we're here waiting for them.
yeah, yeah.
But it's not something we're.
Yeah, I mean, we're not expending a lot of resources. The whole RFQ or RFP, that whole process was done already. I don't know what year that was done. It was probably right before I came, or maybe 2014.
Yeah.
So we're not expending.
Roman was the only one who
I
actually
believe so,
submitted
yes.
any
Mhm.
kind of information.
And then Catalyst Project number 2, I feel like we're doing that already.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to continue to do it.
And we're doing number 3.
We're doing number 3, and number 5's done.
And we did number 5.
Well, we're not completely done with it, but, you know,
It's there.
the phase 2 and
Still
the
got-
plaza.
Still gotta go from
Right.
the plaza through,
The plaza itself has to be completed, and then, yep.
Well, really still need to build it from the city park to the south end of the county with the Civil War rail trail, but that's another issue.
And then the expanded downtown arts and events program, and I know they're working
That was one
hard
of the
through that.
conversation, was expanding events.
Yep.
Yes. Continue to work on
And
that.
expanded and targeted home ownership support.
Now, we talked about that at the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
that,
We didn't have a majority that didn't want to do that at that time.
okay.
But again, this is for your,
And,
I think
and
it's
keep it,
important to encourage homeownership. I just don't think that we should be, I think the comment that you had made was that that was one of your top priorities. And my point was, I don't think it should be a top priority, because I don't think it's a realistic expectation. I don't think we should not encourage it, and I don't think we should not support programs like HMDP and other places, but I just don't think it's realistic to make that a top priority.
well, and if you remember correctly, mine was more about stabilizing existing communities as home ownership programs go. Like, you know, our South End neighborhood first group and homes in that area. Like we did on Summit Avenue, we tore down, you know, what was it, 525 or whatever it was. Those are the kind of things that I think we should be prioritizing, is stabilizing our communities, which is one of the things that everybody says they want to do when they're running for election, but then when the time comes to actually create something like that. And I believe that,
I
you know,
don't
when we
think
have.
stabilizing a neighborhood and encouraging home ownership are the same thing.
Well, I
do you
think
mean?
we have to encourage folks to want to buy a home here. You
Yeah,
know,
one
I
of
think
the-
that that's
one
kind of part of
the problems
it.
I've had with, yeah, we want to encourage people to buy homes here that can afford it. But one of the problems I've always had is, you know, we've got these programs that we want to make it easy for people to be a first-time homeowner, and we want to give them grants, give them support, give them low-interest loans and all that. And what we're doing is, as someone who lives in a house that's almost 100 years old and have done it several times, the cost of maintaining, you're basically setting somebody up to fail. You know, you take a low-income family, and you make it attractive enough for them to move into an 85 to 100-year-old house, you're gonna bankrupt them. I mean, it looks
on the
on,
maintenance
it
of
looks
the-
on the surface, they see this as the greatest thing that ever happened to them, and they take advantage of it, and they move their family in. Now the bills start coming in to keep this thing alive, and that's just my point on that. I think we're doing a disservice in some cases to people.
In some situations, but I also think that, you know, as Frederick kind of gets bigger and more developed and people want to start moving west, the people that are able to afford, you know, the maintenance on those homes will want to live here. But unfortunately, we haven't had that, you know, we don't have that image yet to want to build, you know, to want to own here. So, and as I've always said, I don't think that the realtors are really focused on selling things in the city for whatever reason.
Well, they're trying to.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to, but.
I think they're focused more on county property. So, you know, I think that it's really important to figure out a way to to target homeownership support, just like it says, you know, not necessarily getting low-income families to buy a 150-year-old house.
Well, that was the definition of what is targeted home ownership support, because when I read that, I think that's our programs to try to encourage first-time homeowners to.
I think it's
Take
to
advantage
encourage
of this.
homeownership.
Homeownership.
I mean, there's a reason that Frederick, as an example, Gaithersburg as another example, Salisbury, I mean, you can pick any one of these, have a level of sustainable tax base assessment and have 58% homeownership. That, you know, compared to the city at less than 40%. There's clearly a dynamic when you look at, I think the one census area that I recall where, I think it's the Bester census area, you know, where I think there's a total of 11.5% homeownership, you know, in that particular census tract of the city. I think that part of the goal of that catalyst is to reverse that curve, which then stabilizes those neighborhoods.
I think that was the general idea, not that we necessarily have the answer yet on how we're doing
No, we
that,
don't
but
have the
we're.
answer.
And
I mean,
I
one-
think,
One is to
I
encourage
think also,
homeownership, but the other aspect of it is to try to do something about poverty, because that's why we don't have homeownership. Let's face it, it's because we don't have people, when we have 27% of our population living below the poverty level, and what we do essentially is complain about those people, act like they're not our constituents, and don't have a thing in our priorities about trying to get 27% of our population up out of poverty. That's a big bite, and it's not necessarily something so simple to solve, but let's face it, that's our problem. It's not trying to get people to buy homes, it's trying to get people to live here who have the income to buy a home. That's what we're trying to do. And at the same time, we've got to understand that when, you know, Austin, you've pointed out in some emails and other things, you said today that the number one beef is about crime. There's discussions about how can we have a thriving downtown when we have people that we don't like to see downtown, right? And we equate all of those things to lack of homeownership, lack of money, but yet there's not one thing on our list to say that we should do anything to address the very core problem that we all seem to say that we have. And it's all one word, it's all poverty. That's what it is. You know, it's when we say that we don't like to see the people we're seeing on the street, it's, come on, it's not because they're black, it's not because they're white, it's not because they're yellow, it's because they're poor. And people get concerned about that. And we don't have anything in here, as I recall, about goals and priorities of trying to do the very things that Kristen has talked about for as long as he's been on the council, that Emily's talked about, that we've all talked about, and that's solving this core problem of low-income housing, which means low-income folks. And that's not a priority in our goals.
In my mind, when I said about Hagerstown having its own EDC type board to focus on bringing higher paying jobs and jobs in general and decent paying jobs, not just minimum wage, that was my thought process.
But I think at the same
Indirectly.
time, if we don't start trying to work to address some of the core problems that we will never solve in this administration, and we probably won't solve in my lifetime, but if someone doesn't get on the kick, and some have, okay, because education is the key. I mean, that is the key. Let's not kid each other. And what's going on in the Bester community is a prime example of a group that has decided to have a goal and priority of addressing one particular neighborhood in this city and trying to lift it up. And they're doing things to do that. Jim Kirchhoff, I think, is heading the, I already forget the name of the literacy group that they're doing. But probably so.
Yep.
But if we as a city, you know, and we do have those as priorities with our children, with the summer programs and things we have, but if we don't acknowledge what some of our really core problems are, and these things are great, but I gotta tell you something. I can take this stuff and make a paper airplane out of it. And the reason I say that, it's all great. You know, it's great to talk about this stuff until April and May. When we start talking about retention and hiring of police officers, cameras, all these great things, it costs money. And, you know, nowhere in here is there a goal that says we aren't gonna raise taxes. But as people say, when election time comes, that's the only goal anybody has, is not to raise taxes. So we have all these goals and priorities that do nothing but cost money that we don't have, because they're all on top of what we already have looked at budgets, and last year said, well, we can't raise taxes again next year like we did this year. And all these goals and priorities are additional expenses to what we already have in our budget. So it's great. It's just like the splash pad. I mean, we all want a splash pad. Rodney keeps trying to throw cold water on our splash pad, and, you know, he may win because it all gets down to one thing. When it gets down to it, it gets down to May in the budget. And, you know, look how much time we just spent today, as Kristen would know and Bob, on talking about $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 items, whether it's Discovery Station or another. And so these goals and priorities are wonderful. But they all need to be funded. And unless people are gonna sit here and say we will fund them, then all they are is like goals for some future when we have money. There are things that probably can be done that require no money. I mean, going purple required some money, but it had an effect much more, hopefully, than the money that it cost. And I just say, to me, my biggest goal and priority is working with people to try to pull our community and our citizens and our constituents out of poverty. And it won't be done quickly, and it's a long-term project, you know, and this is the last thing, I'll get off this in 1 second, but it's like guns. You know, everybody, when there's something happens and people say, well, if this gun legislation would have been passed, it wouldn't have saved anybody, and they're right. And there's no gun legislation that anybody's ever gonna pass today that's gonna solve gun problems tomorrow. But if you don't start doing something, 20 years from now, nothing else will have been done. And we need to do something. We need to take something to pick, like we've done with Bester, and say, let's get this community out of poverty. Let's get these children reading. Let's try to find a way to get the people that are surrounding our library so they can use Wi-Fi to get productive. Let's find a way to take the people that we see as problems and turn them into solutions. Do I have the solution for that? No. But the solution for all these goals and priorities is simple. It's money. And we don't have it. And that's my issue. And that's why a lot of times I have problems with goals and priorities. Because I've said it many times, this whole thing circles around one time a year, and everything else is just talk. And then we get to the budget. And that's where it all is. And what you have to do is decide, is the priority going to be that we don't raise taxes, or is the priority going to be, for instance, that we do raise taxes for the specific purpose of cameras, police officers? And those are hard decisions that have to be made. And I think just talking about, you know, this is like a wish list without any funding sources for them. And I know we have things in here about stabilization of the budget, but that's the same thing we've been discussing for 20 years. And Kristen knows that. He's been the first one to say that unless we made substantial changes, but a lot of those changes are in direct opposition to what's in here. because it involves money and involves personnel. So that's my rant for tonight.
Okay, we're on economic development.
Need an educated workforce, Mayor.
Yes, we do. And unfortunately, although I agree with much of what you said, I also know that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So even if you have these programs in place, and you're not gonna help all those people, and you're not gonna lift all of them. And
Bob, I
the way
totally
it
agree
works.
with you, and that's why I use the Bester as an example. Is let's start somewhere. Let's start somewhere. Let's join in with Bester, with Sandmar, what they're doing right now. And say, let's join them and use this as a project that doesn't have to cost money.
You know how they did that and started that off and developed so quickly? And I'll say Washington Goes Purple did the same thing by marketing a common, positive thing for people to rally behind. Like Bester Community Hope came out and said, we're gonna change this, we're gonna rally everyone here, and here's how we're gonna do it. And I know this community needs inspiration, because we all want to be out of poverty, and we have meetings down at the CVB, and we have all these meetings, and we all want that same thing, but it can't be the five of us and them at this table that turns that tide completely. Like, we need to rally the community to also step up and help, to volunteer, to educate, to mentor kids. I mean, there's organizations here that don't even have enough board members to vote on anything right now that are helping, supposed to be helping kids. Our job, I think, besides funding, which of course is most important, is to rally the community and inspire them to get back and start helping everyone get to that place that we want to be, which goes back to marketing and promotion, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But that's what Bester Community of Hope did well. They gave a message of inspiration. So in the midst of all these bad reports about what was going on over there and how they weren't ready for kindergarten and kids weren't eating and just this stuff that makes your heart hurt, they came out and said, we're gonna fix it. And they rallied that community that necessarily didn't always go out and show up for events and volunteer. And I think that's what we have to do better out of this city hall, because we don't.
But, you know, I hear the "we" part, and, you know, I know folks may not agree with this, but, you know, let's take the housing summit that we had, you know, a couple of years back. You know, part of the impetus of that was to address this very topic of neighborhood stability. The fact that, you know, we had a number of homes vacant in every neighborhood, that we have apartments that are in decline and in degradation, and, you know, and that we have, you know, those dynamics of decline, you know, in those neighborhoods, and the resulting process of that discussion boiled down to one sort of position, which is, you know, how do we provide more? I mean, that's what it boiled down to. We broke into segments, and it ended up being, you know, frankly speaking, a plethora of, you know, well-meaning social service entities throughout the county, meeting in downtown Hagerstown, saying, how do we bring more into Hagerstown? And that's what it ended up being. And so we sit at this table and we say, okay, you know, how do we address this issue of poverty? How do we address this issue of, you know, having a higher percentage of poverty, a higher percentage of individuals with needs across that gambit? And you know, we have just, you know, a continually growing effort of expanding those service capabilities. And we are a hub, and those entities treat, frankly, Hagerstown as a hub of that effort. And I don't know how we sit here as a city, as 6 people, as City Hall, however you want to define us, you know, until those entities, and I keep saying this, come to the table
What
And
entities?
all of the entities provide all of the social subsidy services across this community that largely do so through service delivery in our urban core, in our broader city proper, do so without a collective awareness of the impact that it has. Probably on an individual level, certainly they do, but I think on a collective level, I don't think that does occur. I mean, we can sit and we can get emails every week, just as we've done the last 10 years, for the next 10 years, about the activity at a place like Dagmar, right? And I've said this over and over, we can change the face of downtown with millions and millions of dollars, but until, that sort of effort is in concert with that economic development directive, you're gonna be overwhelmed by it. I mean, has anybody in here seen a single entity over the last 10 years decline in that service delivery? No.
Well, why
Has-
would they? People are poor.
But everybody keeps saying that it grows, and in concert with the population of the city, the population of the city of Hagerstown's what, grown maybe 1% a year, and that delivery system has expanded exponentially compared to that. I mean, I think the average person sees it, understands it, recognizes it, and expresses concern about it to us. And so, for me, I see those goals on these sheets as a way to get beyond that, and to push beyond that if need be. And the non-monetary ones are to demand accountability of it from all of those partners, including those entities, whether it be the folks that are, are putting folks in hotels and apartments and all those types of things that have an impact on our ability to be economically sustainable, to be neighborhood stable. And I don't see us communicating with them at this point, let alone communicating in a collective and sort of, direct manner, or that communication being, reciprocated. I mean, I could go on example after example of those types of communication, whether it be the gentleman who came and spoke to us about, the impact of folks were having on his laundromat, and the letter we got back from the agency that he identified of the individuals, conducting that type of declining activity, was one of almost dismissive spite. I mean, we can't have that type of outlook in this community, because I feel like we're sort of looking in one direction, and that service delivery is looking in a completely sort of separate direction. And so, yeah, this goal may be a wish list, but for me, it's a means to either say you're with us as partners in this process of growth, or you get held accountable and eventually left behind.
I just don't. The entities that offer services, I mean, if you go in there and watch what happens in there, I mean, call me naive, but you can't tell me there's a single person working in any of those places that is really happy to go to work that day.
I'm not saying
and
that.
see the devastation that they're seeing and want to keep it going. Like, they want to help too.
They
I mean-
want to get people out of their
I hear what you're
situations.
saying.
I think you're right, we all need to be on the same page, and maybe communication is lacking. But I don't think I don't think anyone's trying to grow. I mean, they're growing because the need is there.
The need, I mean,
The
somebody
need
have to
grows.
show me need
The
locally.
need
I mean,
grows because the services are offered.
And I
Services are
know-
offered everywhere in the state of Maryland,
Everywhere in the country.
everywhere in the country.
All right.
You think ours is just more focused here in?
I think
The
that it
city of
is, I think
Hagerstown?
that it is certainly regionally driven, which adds to that growth mechanism.
If you look at the real
100%.
estate, the real estate footprint downtown of how many city blocks are taken up with social services, you know, why aren't any of those social services out in the county, you know, closer to other pockets? I mean, why is everything in downtown?
Because that's where the income is the lowest and where people are hungry
And then
and need
people
homes.
move into downtown where income is, where rent is the lowest, and then it, again, as Krista says, it grows exponentially at that point. Our downtown core grows at that point. You know,
It's reverse social Hagerstown has been the product of social engineering, and it wasn't a deliberate social engineering, it's social engineering that happened. It started back in the sixties when we built prisons right outside the city.
and then we built the first prison outside the city in the 1800s.
Okay,
Okay?
well, the big ones. But,
All right, listen, these are actually, this is a great conversation to have at some other point than this evening. Let's get through this list, and we can revisit this again. We can revisit this conversation, but let's get through this list first, and then we can, we don't have to adopt these this evening or next Tuesday.
But if we're in the middle of a productive conversation that has to do with this list, why would we just move on?
Do you think we're in the middle of productive conversation?
I just
Well,
point
yeah.
out that this for me isn't a wish list, it's a roadmap. I mean, that's how I see this.
I think it's necessary.
I think it's necessary to, it's not fair for us, we have a whole team of members, a lot of them are in the audience tonight and who we're telling, hey, go do something. I think we need to give them direction as well, because I think for the first 2 years of this administration, we've been like, hey, do
Yeah,
this.
yeah, we do,
Come
and
on,
that's
do
by
that, do
going
this.
off
So-
this goal-setting priority list that we had, and then giving them direction when we finally adopt the goals that are on this piece of paper. And if you want to add to these goals, great.
Yes, I mean.
But let's get through this list first, and then we can, they'll get some direction from us at that point in time.
And in answer to reducing poverty, I mean, where can that, I mean, obviously that is a top
It's part of
goal.
economic
I mean,
development.
Right, you know, so does that need to be I mean, obviously, everyone in the country would like to reduce poverty, for heaven's sake, so, I mean, should it be listed as a goal? I mean, or isn't that like an understatement? Like, we know that's what's supposed to happen with all of these goals?
I mean,
Business
that's certainly
retention,
the-
expansion, and attraction, work with existing and prospective businesses and investors to retain, expand, and attract jobs and investment in Hagerstown. That is a goal to create jobs. so
Which is
that-
what your intention was.
Right, exactly. Her intention was to create jobs and reduce poverty.
But what?
And again, you can lead a horse to drink, but you cannot make, or to water, but you cannot make him drink, and it doesn't matter. You know, you can,
Why do you keep bringing that up? Like, we have to give them something to lead to. I just think it's like disparaging, like, it's continuous every week about homeless people, and not everyone wants help, we get that. Like, isn't it our job to give them inspiration and give them something?
yeah, I'm
Like,
just
right
trying
now,
to
we're not
remind you,
leading them
Melissa,
to
you don't
anywhere.
forget that that still
I'm well aware I'm
is
not
there. You have
Superwoman
those
and we can't save
individuals
the world,
who
but we gotta
are not
try.
going to accept the help and do not want to do anything other than what they're doing with their life, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't so, but it is.
But I think that what we were saying, you know, when.
And that's our image.
Right, with the image, exactly. So when we went to MML and we talked about, like, you know, having that marketing image and having that positivity and rallying the community around it, and we're missing that right now. We don't have that. Unfortunately, the only thing that we have is a what's going on in Hagerstown Facebook page times 20 with negativity just constantly. So that's unfortunately what our image is when people, you know, do a Google search that they want to move here. the City of Hagerstown Facebook page or the City of Hagerstown Google page is like a 3.2 stars with negative comment, negative comment, negative comment, negative comment. So if we don't have a positive image and a marketing plan, we're gonna continue that. Washington Goes Purple is just like Lou said, is a great way to rally everyone around and, and that's not gonna solve everything, but at least it starts in order for us to keep moving on these other projects that maybe people will want to move to Hagerstown because they want to invest in a 100-year home, because the incentives are good and the restaurants are great and we have positivity that we've been lacking, unfortunately, for 10 years.
And I'll just say that if you go on Greencastle's, what's going on in Greencastle, or what's going on in Frederick, you don't see the kind of posts that you see under what's going on in
No.
Hagerstown, so.
You don't. Can that be a project? Can we ban those Facebooks?
Well, there's something coming up. There was a community promotion in
Block over
Prague.
here.
Right.
Yes, and I have an idea, I'm just waiting to get there, because I would like to get support tonight on something.
Okay.
What's that?
Jason and
So, I mean, should our goals be more high? The first one there, the catalyst projects, I just feel like it's tired. I keep hearing about the catalyst projects, it's tired. Maybe under economic development, we do need to have a mission statement pretty much in there, is what it would be in there, about, as Lou was saying, lifting people out of poverty. And that's a huge spectrum of things. Lifting people out of poverty is, maybe you don't provide some services. A lot of times you can provide too many services, and what you do is you keep people in poverty because there's no reason to get out of poverty. You trap them in it. You don't give them an incentive to move out, to step out, and a means to do it. So maybe maybe we get rid of these catalyst projects. I mean, those are dealt with many other organizations. Greater Hagerstown meets and talks about these and everything else. Maybe we need to have higher level goals, like more macro level that we're focusing on. And that's part of economic development.
I hear what you're saying about them being tired, because that terminology is something that we've used over and over again. I think they were they're in here because they're in our, what's that, 20,
It's a 10-year
30?
plan.
Yeah, and the other
35.
plans and stuff like that. But I know what you're saying, like, hey, we're focused on Catalyst Project number 3. It's like, okay. But I don't think you take it out, because I still think they're
they're ongoing.
Yeah, well,
ongoing
the idea
plan.
there was, when we spoke on the 13th, that was the question to you all.
We took out
Do
4
you
and
all
7, right.
support the community city center plan, the 10-year plan? You could have said at that point, no, we don't, we want to shelve that. But you didn't.
no, we support
right.
it.
And you supported these particular ones out of that, and a little bit less focus on 2 other ones. But, we could certainly take a look at that again if you want to revisit the community city center plan.
I think it's important to support these projects. I think removing it.
The Class A, like.
It's clearly
class
moved,
space is
okay.
kind of-
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
silly.
Isn't it enough to say to implement the community city center plan? I mean, that's our goal.
Without
Well,
listing
because
catalyst
listing-
projects?
Because you
Yeah.
took out 2 of them. That's why, otherwise we wouldn't have had to list them like that. You took out
Oh, I
number,
see
you
what you're
took out
saying.
number
Yeah, we
4.
took out
We
4
took
and
out, we
7,
removed
right.
2.
Yeah. And then said, try to have staff focus energies on these.
Okay.
Okay.
Should we go to budget
Oh,
stabilization?
gosh.
I like that one. Actually, that goes back to like some of the things Kristen was, the first one in there, the possibility of a citywide payment in lieu of taxes for agencies that are exempt from paying real property taxes. I think that's,
Yep.
we're providing city services, fire, police, everything else. There's got to be some sort of,
And that's something that staff really couldn't bring unless we knew that you were, at least we had a majority of you that would be willing to do that, because that is going to be a very tough, difficult conversation. And when it gets down to looking at all the nonprofits, the churches, the schools, everybody that cannot, once you do it, you can't let some out and others in, so that will be a difficult conversation. But that is clearly something that we seem to have a majority at that time to go ahead and look at.
Yeah, because it's a very difficult conversation to have with property owners today.
To raise their taxes.
Yeah.
Got to raise your taxes.
Yep.
Because we've got more and more and more nonprofits moving in
It's-
downtown that we got to pay for.
I think
Yep.
unfortunately, it's a necessary evil conversation that has to be
Yep.
had.
Yeah, it's reality.
Yep.
It's reality.
That's true.
You know what, and I would be, I would be willing to support that if proceeds from those taxes go toward creating some kind of a workforce development fund that
There
can
you
help
go.
people
Yeah.
lift them out of poverty. I'd be 100%
I
behind
think
that.
that's a quite reasonable, and that's an easier conversation to have.
Sure.
Like if there's a goal for what,
Right.
What you're doing, why you're
for
doing it.
why you're
Exactly.
doing it.
I mean.
And maybe
you
that's
know,
not the end result, maybe that's not the form,
Well, I mean, I don't think that's the catch. I don't think that's everything that can be, but I mean, I
No.
think there should be
Yeah.
an element of that in there that creates, whether it's,
It gives you a funding mechanism to do something.
or whether it's a grant program to go to, the John Barr and learn a trade. I mean, there has to be something that we can show a benefit, out of this taxing authority, whether it's.
Well, it provides a funding that you wouldn't have. I mean,
No,
those
exactly.
nonprofits are there, they've been there, we provide the city services and everything else, but we don't, because we're providing city services for them, we don't have some funding that we need to do something like
Right.
a jobs program.
Exactly.
So now we can pay for a police department, we can pay for a fire department, and we can have a jobs program.
Okay, grow cesspool base, everybody good at trying to do that?
Yes.
Through neighborhood revitalization and sustainability. Promote improvements to the state tax assessment and appeals process.
Yes.
And that would be working with, SDAT and continuing to look at, are there changes that we could possibly bring, some, possible changes to the state law, some things that might help us? Just like the conversation we had about when Melissa and them were here a couple weeks ago.
I'm good with what you have in here. I am also late for my daughter's birthday party.
Well, you
so-
can't be that, so.
I gotta get
happy
out.
birthday.
No disrespect to staff, but
Okay. Thank you.
We've got to try to get through this. Someone's got to talk to the Boy Scout to settle.
Okay. Well, we can come back too.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have
We
to
can do
rush
in
through
another
this
work
tonight.
No,
This
I
doesn't,
feel like
I mean,
rushed to, yeah.
and we've
can
made it,
bring
let's
this on
just say
another
we've
work
made it
session.
through
Yeah.
budget stabilization and we're good on all that we've discussed so far, right?
Yeah, I think we can bring it to another.
Let's do
Do
another
you
one.
wanna, you don't wanna ask her?
I'll do it in my council comment.
Okay,
Sorry?
nothing. She's,
You want to do that? We'll schedule for another work session.
Yeah.
it's up to,
Thank you, guys, for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
thanks.
Rocks. City Administrator,
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Shelley,
No, sir.
Lou,
Ditto.
Austin.
I will not be here next week. That's all I have.
So Austin gets the invocation next week.
Oh, yes.
Oh, he said you will not be here next
I
week?
will not be here.
Okay.
All right, I have a couple things. One, I met with Aaron Penetrance after the light pole thing last week, and had the conversation, we didn't get to it tonight, but about a citywide marketing plan, like what is our mission,
that's
what is,
right.
yeah, and I know it's in there. But I think it would be a really cool idea. We kind of touched on this earlier about the art. People always say, can involve the community, involve the community. So why don't we have a citywide contest for our mission statement? And the requirements are that you had to be a resident of the city of Hagerstown. And we do it through some fashion, our social media pages, whatever, and take in submissions, and then we can put together a group like Marianne Burke from the Arts Council, Aaron, since he's on Main Street, maybe us, different artists or citizens throughout the community, and vote on what we want our mission statement or our marketing
Image,
scheme to
our
be.
image,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then Main Street can take that, since they have the ability to get grants and they're already working on an imagery branding, take that and develop that into something.
That's cool.
I think it would incorporate the public, and hopefully we would get some good ideas.
I like that. I also think we need to, since we're talking about image, the image piece right now, we need to counter some of the negative comments, because when I read the negative comments on social media, and I bite my tongue because I don't really feel like getting into a pissing contest with these people.
It's best not to.
It's best not to, but there's such, I'm so tired of hearing, of seeing, Hagerstown stinks, not stinks, but it's,
Thank God I'm the
that
mayor.
begins with that letter. Or, but, it's just this blanket statement, and there's nothing to do in Hagerstown, You can challenge that all day long. I don't feel like doing it. I don't really want to get into it with
Yeah,
it.
but part of what our imaging and branding as it evolves can be that. Can be, okay, let's take the top 20 negative comments that have been made, and let's create a counter.
And
to that.
deal
I mean, that
deal
can be
with
part
them.
of what you're
Okay,
growing.
put
Yep.
them together and deal with them.
Yes.
Here's what's being said, not getting into a knockdown, drag out with an individual.
statement each time, like,
Yeah, but
here's our response.
right, but part of.
Click on this website, and it'll take us to our.
I have always wanted to do this
Page.
since I got in office and people started saying really mean things, and I think it would be hilarious if we could all do it and get on board. He said no and Kirsten said no, but maybe you guys will say yes. Jimmy Kimmel does mean tweets where he has celebrities read mean stuff that people have written about him.
Oh,
And I
I'm all
honestly think
in.
it would be hilarious if we did it, had Wes record it, because people make some wild comments. And it's humbling, but I think it would make people laugh and also make people see, like, hey, people say really foul, ignorant, personal things against us. And then also use that as a way to be like, change that narrative. And also the bad, not just about us personally. I mean, I got a laundry list of them I could read, but about the city, and then counteract that, so,
Yeah, I
all
like
they
that
say-
idea.
It's always, I heard, a guy said the other day, we make $200,000 a year.
Oh, my gosh.
Like,
We
ooh, I
can't
wish,
live on that.
Yeah, like, what is that, our whole budget for, so, I just,
Okay.
even taking smart comments like that and like playing on it
Mm-hmm.
and making it funny, and also being witty and a little smart back at them, because I think sometimes people deserve it.
Well, I think
So
that
I'm
that's
in.
you're not allowed. Not
No,
you. You're out.
your internet privileges were revoked a long time ago, but
That's part of
I
the
just think it
plan.
would be a funny, way to kind of take that negative, really nasty stuff and kind of just poke
Let
fun
me
at
give you an
it, but
example
also turn
of
it
just
around.
today, when the article came out about the marijuana distribution center
At the bank.
up on Basil Boulevard at the old Columbia Bank, okay? Now, people have been clamoring for that ability in this community to help with, pain management and all those kind of things. And we have an article this morning in the paper about it, and all you saw under that article was, great, drive-through high and all that. I'm thinking, did you not read the article?
No, they don't read.
I mean, which is what I put, even though the article states they won't use a drive-through, but okay, go ahead. I mean, those are the kind of things that Emily talks about that are just, so, I mean, here you have something that's a positive for people. And we turn it into this negative.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It's something to help deal with the opioid
Drive me
crisis.
insane, right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I like that idea. I think that sounds fun and somewhat
I'd be
lighthearted.
more than
and-
willing to do it, because I get I get a lot of mean stuff said about me, so.
God, if you're gonna read them, I'll send you one.
Well, I gotta stop sending Emily something.
I think they did. I think
It would be yeah, wait a minute, you're not allowed to read each other's that you sent to each other.
I
All right,
like
what
that
else?
idea.
Anything else,
so-
Em?
Yeah, the other day, we had a meeting with Dan Spedden at the CVB and about their employees and incidents that they've had. They wanted to be very transparent with us, so they had a PowerPoint presentation of any incidents they've had at the Welcoming Center and what they are going to do to counteract some of the issues that they're having, which includes closing on Sundays because the business community is not really out downtown on Sundays and they feel more vulnerable. So Shelley and Austin and I were there, and we spoke outside for a couple minutes afterwards about some ideas and met with Chief Kiefer about it and also contacted Dan. So I think it would be a really cool idea if we could have a downtown business public safety forum. I thought we could reach out to Bridge of Life Church since that's an easy auditorium. We'll probably have to have like 2 throughout the day, that way every employee can. But I thought if Dan said he would help take the lead on it, and I'm sure Amanda Whitmore would too, to kind of rally the troops of all the downtown businesses and all of their employees, to have HPD teach them ways to, one, keep themselves alert, keep themselves safe. I think you called it natural surveillance, having people out watching around would help HPD teach them how to use the app. And then also Dan was saying what a big impact it has when business people are walking around downtown and when it's a visual, like on lunch hours. So I thought we could use it as a time to encourage, people to take their break and go walk around downtown or go visit each other at other businesses.
Actually, Jill's on vacation this week, but I think, and Chief, you might know something more about it. I think Jill and Amanda are already starting something like that with getting the downtown businesses together and having you talk to. So, this is a little bit different, but so we're all kind of already in that groove, so we can clearly, add to that and
If
do
we can
that.
invite every employee, and I understand businesses can't close for long periods of time, but even if we made it short and could do one at like 8 a.m. before the 9 a.m. businesses open, or 12, do it on their lunch hour, maybe 5, so right after work, that people could flex their schedule and invite, everyone around here, because it seems like there have been a few incidences, but a lot of them are really just people being scared of certain types of people. And so if we can get everyone up out of their buildings, taking a walk or going out on lunch, or even just explaining, like, here's the facts. So I think if Chief presents the very insignificant amount of real incidences that have happened, like dangerous incidences, I think it would help people see, like, okay, I can walk.
Yeah, the key takeaway I had about that was it's a passive deterrent. The fact that businesses are out and people are out on the street during the day. And I think it's a way to educate people how to utilize that, how to keep that going, and by using the app, how to participate in being a passive deterrent too.
Because I think people want to help, and they want to know how to keep themselves safe, but they want to help too, and that could help teach them, like, what should really be reported, and what is more just.
Well, I think that shows our support. Like,
Right.
we hear you. We know, we're not trying to say that there's not a problem. We understand that there's a problem, and here's a way that we can, help.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay,
That it?
That's it. Oh.
Okay. I don't have anything. See you next Tuesday. I'll be doing
Remember,
the
6 o'clock next,
invocation.
it's 6 o'clock next Tuesday, because we're having the work session and the public